Hello, everyone. Welcome to the scene building workshop for the second act solution. My name is Jim Hull, and I will be your host and educator for the next, hopefully less than 2 hours, but there's a chance it could go longer because there's so much to go over. And my intent for this is to show you the approach that I use both in my own stuff and then also working with other writers and how I use subtext and the dramatic theory to help build scenes. So when you have no idea what the heck your story is going to do in the middle of the story, but you have a kind of a good idea of what you want the entire thing to be, how you can go through and be able to do that. So first off, what the heck is, where is Chrome? Hold on, I'm sharing my screen. I currently want to share this screen, which is located right. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. So the cohort that I started this in the fall. I called it the Page Master because I thought it was really clever because that's the first film I ever worked on. And then it was going to transform everybody into a Page Master. And then I got hooked up with this Maven group who is creating cohort classes, which is the weirdest name, but it basically just means it's just a university class where people can ask questions and it's a back and forth instead of like a Udemy thing where you pay $80 and never watch it. So in doing that, then we came up with the better name for it, which was the second act solution, which was based on a conversation I had with a novelist who, when he talks to agents, everybody can write a great first act. Everybody knows what the ending is going to be, but then in the middle, they get lost and they're like, well, what the heck were we supposed to do? So I have a great solution for that, which is something I've been working on for quite some time. And then that's what I'm going to share with you now. Wow, there's lots of people showing up. Okay, so it's called the second act solution. Okay, so first, who am I? Okay, my name is Jim Hull, and 5 years ago, I started Narrative First Inc., which is a story consultancy service for writers of every medium. So that's screenwriters, executive producers, directors, novelists, playwrights, game designers, documentary filmmakers. And I even helped write stories for pharmaceutical companies, which is really strange, but you can do it. It's really cool. So anytime anybody wants to tell a meaningful story, that's where I'm coming from. Hopefully this has, okay. So I'm a former animator, storyboard artist, and director. I worked at Disney for 5 years, DreamWorks for 15, and then various other places, did like theme park animation, which will outlast me forever. And then some other television shows. But there was a significant amount of time, particularly at DreamWorks, about 10 years, where I got really frustrated with the stories because they wouldn't have complete stories. So they would just have a kind of an idea of what it is, and then they would figure it out in the last 8 weeks of production, which meant 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, which was quite taxing. So that's eventually why I left to create Narrative First. While I was an animator, I would start to blog on my site, which was originally called Story Fanatic, because that was about how fanatical I was about story. And then eventually about 10 years ago, I switched over to Narrative First, with the idea being it would be nice if productions had the narrative first. They had the idea figured out first, because like I heard with the latest Spider-Man, they had no idea. And even while they were shooting, they had no idea what's going to happen in the last act. So it would be nice if you knew where you're actually headed instead of figuring it out at the last minute. And not that this process is perfect, but it can get you like 85% there. So yeah, I started that in September 2016. And then a year later, in order to scale, because I'm one person and I could tell that there was a lot more people that would be interested in this, I started to build this app called Subtext, which is essentially all my story consulting put into an application, a practical application of the dramatic theory of story that then could go out to billions of people. And so I started slowly building that out in 2017. And now it's been about 4.5 years. And it's almost 100% complete. And one of the new ideas is the thing that I'm doing in 2022, which is going to be really, really cool. Along the way, professional, just so you know, I'm legit, or that I have credit, whatever, that I helped develop the Tangled series for Disney using the same exact process that I'm showing you here. And then with the same exact thing, sold was supposed to be a film, but then the company took a different turn. So I don't know if that'll ever see the light of day. And okay, so what is subtext? So the main point of Subtext, the driving force of it, is it's the only writing app that's out there that can take the thematic premise, what it is that you're trying to say, and convert it into your outline, like an intelligent outline. And it's not going to be the same outline for every story. It's going to be based on what it is you're trying to say, like the meaning of your story. And that's what I'll show you today. We're going to actually develop a quarter of the story, so you can see how it takes what it is that you're trying to say and creates something meaningful. Again, that's been running since 2017. Thousands of people have signed up. There's hundreds active. It's not everybody. The point of Subtext is do all the work for the outlining and then go and write. So you can leave. You don't have to keep. In fact, it's probably not a good idea to stay in Subtext forever and do this. Otherwise, you're never going to finish anything. Over 11,000 different story forms have been created with 285,000 story beats, which we'll get into what each of those are, which I think is crazy. I have 515 example story forms, and a story form is the structure. It's basically a blueprint of meaning for the story. And so right now there's 515. I'm constantly adding new ones every week. And stuff that it's done. It's helped one screenwriter reach the top of the blacklist in 2020. Another documentary filmmaker to win multiple awards for his films, including the one that's going to be coming out in the spring, which I'm sure will be best documentary. And then helped one actress and writer write her first musical, which is currently being workshopped. And this is the craziest, is I helped one of Justin Bieber's music producers write a Christmas special. So I just think that's a crazy stat. It doesn't mean anything. All right, so let's go to Subtext. Or let me show you all this stuff here, and we'll start building the scene. So this is narrative first. So anytime I have hundreds of articles here, anytime you ever want to read anything or learn about the process and what's going on here, this is the place to go. We're going to be spending all our time in the workshop today on scene structure and actually getting into the deep meaning of stuff. So there's a lot more detail that can go into it. And in the cohort, I take you through the process. So I'm going to jump ahead just because it's the cooler stuff, and you'll likely get a pretty good idea of what that means. So this is the article that we'll be going over today, which is basically breaking down the story beats of your entire story, but in almost looking at the atomic properties of what makes them up. So it'll give you an outline, a thematic outline of what it is you're trying to do or what you're trying to say. But then the way you illustrate it is completely up to you. So this is Subtext, and essentially everybody's seen The Matrix. I'm sure everybody's excited about next week. This is what The Matrix looks like, and this is what The Shawshank Redemption looks like, which I think is funny, but this is the very first scene of Shawshank Redemption, and this is actually how Subtext runs. But it's a lot prettier and a lot easier for people to understand, because what I do is take all those numbers and then turn them into thematic issues and words that, for the most part, there's a lot of terminology. And if you're familiar with Dramatica, sometimes the terminology can be frustrating. So I've added a lot of tools to make that easier. There's always ways to make it better. But pretty much the words mean what you think they mean. And even if you get the words wrong, if you're consistently wrong, you're okay. So think of them like writing prompts as a way to keep going in there. The other thing I should mention too, if you're excited about all this stuff and it's really exciting, is I have a YouTube channel that I just started. Every day I post 10-minute videos, tutorials, just going over everything, which I've done for the last week consistently, even if I have to stay up super late. That just goes over everything in a brief little bite-sized thing, so you can learn whatever you want and all the stuff that goes on in there. So feel free to subscribe to that, and let's get started. Okay, so what I wanted to do, so I've been watching a lot of Westerns lately. So Old Henry, which I saw last week, which I thought was fantastic. The Harder They Fall, which was great. and I'm a huge Western fan. So today we're going to create a Western, and it's going to be somewhat familiar, as if you've seen it a million times before, but with a little bit of a different spin to it. So it's somewhat like Old Henry, but a little bit different because I don't want to spoil the film because I think it's great. And then I have my own kind of spin on it. So I know that what I want to do is do a Western with a father-son relationship where the father is somebody who is in the Civil War and doesn't want to have anything to do with fighting or shooting, but the son's like really excited and totally into outlaws and gangsters, and he wants to become a wanted man. And so it's about their journey. They come across a bunch of stolen money, and then they have to run away from the people who want their money back. So it's very basic. It's not very complex. This isn't secession. This isn't a lot of manipulation, psychological stuff going on. It's just really just supposed to be basic so I can show you the different workshop stuff that's going on. Let me make sure I get no chat stuff here. All right. So the first thing, I want to go there. Okay. First thing I want to do is I would come in here to the premise builder and I would just build what it is the story is about. Oh, there's a chat. Hello, everybody. Okay. So the first thing would just be, okay, I want to make this a Western action, and it sets all the different narrative dynamics towards a typical Western and what kind of story that. If you just joined, if you could just mute so I can. Otherwise I'm hearing everybody. Great. All right. Let me see if I can just mute the person myself. Mute all. Okay. Mute all. All right. Cool. That will help. All right. So this one is set up very basic. The one thing you should take away from today is to always think in terms of fours, because that's the way our mind works. So everything in subtext, everything in dramatic theory is based on four things at once. And if you're going to write a whole story and you only have time to do one thing, just make sure that the thing that you're doing the set of four, because that four has a certain particular meaning. You know, there'll be like 4 acts, 4 scenes in each act. In each scene, there'll be 4 beats. Just always think in terms of 4, almost like a Calvin and Hobbes comic strip. Same exact idea. So it's just like the beginning, kind of the 2 in the middle, and then the 1 on the end. Part of that 4 is it splits a complete story into 4 perspectives, 4 through lines, which are based on the way that we think. One is the plot, which is this gray one here, which is essentially what 90% of your story is going to be about. It's the objective story plot. The blue one here is the main character through line. That is the personal through line, which is the person that the audience becomes in the story. So it's from their point of view, and they have their own baggage that they bring into the story. The green here is the challenging influence character. So there's always in a complete story somebody who has an opposing point of view that challenges the main character to grow out of their own preconceptions and their own justifications for doing something. So when you have that cliche thing of you and I are both alike, and somebody says, no, I'm nothing like you, that's the influence character challenging the main character, because there are parts that are somewhat similar, that they are kind of alike, but then they're also very drastically different. And then the last one, which is the one that most people figure or forget to do, especially here in America, would be the relationship story through line, which is the heartfelt perspective that is about community and about, it's like a family, a father-son relationship, which is what we're going to do today, a marriage. It's about the relationship and how it grows. It's not about the individuals in the relationship, but something completely different that helps balance out the plot. So whereas the plot is the logistical relationship between things, the relationship story is the emotional relationship between 2 people, and usually between the main character and influence character. So that, and then we're going to do that today. So in this story, this Western that I just pitched to you, the objective story plot is going to be about obtaining, essentially getting the money back. So, and also getting to safety. It's like, it's Same sort of Western you've seen all the time. The main character, we're not going to be dealing with these other three because they're a lot more subjective and there's a lot more leeway and it would take forever. This was going to take a particular bit of time, the objective story here. So we're just going to focus on that plot. But here, this will be the father will be the main character, the kid, the headstrong kid who's like really excited about fighting and shooting. He's going to be the influence character, and then their relationship is going to be in psychology here. So you can just think just this word here becoming, it's going to be about father, son, and the father worried about the son becoming just like him. Same. So that would be that. And right there you have a complete story. It's just going to be a conventional one. And then just for the elements here that are actually driving the story, so that central argument, that you and I argument, I've chosen the one that's been used a billion times, which is pursuit versus avoid. So on one hand, one person's going to be, hey, let's go and do this. Let's go after these sort of things, wants to pursue. And the other person wants to completely avoid it. So what I did is I actually went ahead and made the entire story beforehand so that people don't have to watch me come up with something on the spot. All right, so then this would be the father's point of view. So Wade Montgomery, that's the name I came up with him. So to Wade, people should stay, see, fix that. People should avoid trouble at all costs in order to stay safe. So it's kind of like his main point of view, just avoid trouble and you'll be safe. Whereas the kid, Austin, so this is Austin Montgomery, who's a 16-year-old son, is somebody who thinks that life doesn't matter much if people aren't out to get you. So not only is he wanting to go out and venture and do his own things, but he wants people to come after him to be a wanted man. That would be awesome. So he could be super famous. And that's where they bump heads with one another. Because to Austin, if no one wants you, did you even exist? So it's kind of a cool little idea there. And then these settings I won't get into. I get into this in the class. But essentially, no, I'm going to skip these. But essentially, the dad is going to change. So he's going to grow out of avoiding conflict and then going after it. So this is his arc here that it's already calculated. And then the arc here for the kid, he's not going to have a 180 change, but he's very passionate, always driven by his feelings, and maybe gets into more trouble because he relies on his feelings too much. That's going to grow to the point where it's going to be crazy. But instead of a happy ending, my favorite kind of endings are the ones that are a little more bleak, where things work out and it's really great, but then it's kind of it's a bad situation. It's not great. If you've ever watched Succession, the TV show, pretty much the first 2 seasons are completely bleak. Every episode ends where things work out, but everybody's miserable and hate each other. So that's a bleak ending, and that's what I'm going to work towards. A Western that has the same sort of feeling. These are all triumphs here. Well, actually, that's open for debate. But Unforgiven would be a Western that has the same sort of ending where he gets revenge for what happened at the beginning of the film, the Clint Eastwood character, but he feels horrible. He's like, it's because he's had to go back to doing what he's always wanted to do. And so I'm kind of cribbing from that for this story. So it's kind of like a mix of Unforgiven and Old Henry all at the same time. So once you have that, and then it makes this premise over here, I'm just going to take it for what it is. I would just click build story, and then Subtext takes the meaning, everything that you picked here, and then gives you the entire outline. And that will end up looking something like this here. So then this would be the Western here. So the premise, the one that I picked, was however bleak, when you abandon running away or steering clear of conflict, you can save something you love. It's a very simple idea, and it's like, oh, okay, I can get a hold of that. And then what it did is it went and it built out this entire story form of what's supposed to happen in the entire story. So it tells you exactly all the thematic issues in the objective story, in the main character, influence character, and relationship story through lines, in order to create a balanced argument. It's like, oh, this, if you want to tell this story and you want to make this argument, these are all the things that have to happen or should happen for the most part. And so we're going to focus on this upper right in the objective story, where the issue is going to be about everybody's selfish interest for the money. And particularly, we're going to focus on these 4 acts. So again, 4 things at once. If you know Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, it can totally work. You just signpost 1 is Act 1, 2 and 3 are Act 2, and then 3 is Act or signpost 4. So it's pretty much whenever you want to think in terms of structure, you want to think in terms of 4s. When you're writing, usually 3 is better just because it's more of the experiential nature of it. So going into the objective story plot here, we have your 4 acts here, which are the same ones that were from that last page I showed, which is something about learning in the beginning, and then in the second act, something about doing. In the third act, we're going to look at some obtaining, and then at the end, some understanding. And then surrounding all these acts are your plot points, what everybody knows as plot points. You can think of this first driver as the inciting incident. It's actually usually something different, but for these purposes of this workshop, totally legit. This would be your first act turn between 1 and 2. This is the midpoint of the entire story, or Act 2. And then this would be the second plot point, which turns from Act 3 into 4. And then this is what ends the story. So I've already worked all this out, so you don't have to make me, or don't have to watch me make this up on the spot. First, the players here. I have Wade Montgomery, who is the father. So he's the main character here. I have his son, Austin, who's the influence character here, and then their father-son relationship. And then the bad guy is Dylan Blackjack, who's the antagonist. And so he's in the objective story. And you can always add more to be able to tell the story that you want to tell. All right, so the first thing we want to do is, or this is what I would do, is to put down all the things that you know you want to happen in terms of the plot points, and then start working the acts. So I know the very first thing I knew was that at the end, I wanted, let's start at the beginning. I'll just start at the beginning. I already knew the ending, but I made some changes, so I want to leave that open. So the first thing here is I came up with, okay. And again, this is going to be very reminiscent, but work with me. So an outlaw running from his gang bleeds out and lands at Wade's doorstep in a satchel, a pile of money stolen from stagecoaches on trail. All right. And of course, he wants nothing to do with it. And already I can think, oh, okay, he doesn't want anybody to learn where this money has gone to. Meanwhile, the people who are missing it are going to want to know what happened to it. Where's this guy gone off to? So that's the first act. And then eventually we're going to get to the second plot point here. So let's see, do I want to tell? I guess at the end, just give away the ending. Yeah, okay. All right, I'll just do it. All right, so then since I know the ending already too, which is, I wanted it to get to a point because I know it's going to end badly, is the dad is going to have to start going back to killing people, or something he never wanted to do before. And then, of course, the son is going to be doing it as well. And that they're going to end up working together and they become their own sort of outlaw gang. So father and son, sorry, I'm going to spoil the ending, finish off Dylan and the entire Blackjack gang. But much to Wade's disappointment, the territory of New Mexico now knows the two of them and his younger sister, Charlotte, as the Montgomery gang, an outlaw group of killers bent on robbing banks and terrorizing the peace. But at least they're a family now. So that's the general idea. So I know where it's going to end. It's kind of a bleak ending, but still kind of cool. And I know where it's going to start. And then now, what the heck's going to happen in the middle? So this is all I came with starting out. It's like, okay, I know generally the kind of feeling I want, but I have no idea what it's supposed to be happening here. Well, in the learning point, like I just pitched, it says a conflict of learning. So then all the conflict that's going to be happening in the first act is going to be about people trying to either find information or not, people to not find information. So what's great about subtext is you might not necessarily know the strict definition of learning. So you can come in here and scroll through the thousands of illustrations for what learning is. And if you don't find what it is you want, you can always submit one, and like learning to stay safe, you can submit one, and then I look at it, review it, and if it works, then I add it to the list of what everybody uses. So I've already gone through and picked these just to save time. But these ideas, how does keeping someone from finding out about something create conflict? So then I come into here. Oh, not that one. Okay, so okay. This is what I riffed on here, which is this. So Wade felt a little guilty when he took the money from the dead man. He knew it wasn't stealing, but he still felt like it was. Wade knew he couldn't turn in the money because he knew that Dylan and his gang would kill him for it. He also knew that if he didn't tell anyone about the money, Dylan would eventually come looking for him. The next morning, after a sleepless night, Wade decided to return the money. He made a trip downtown, deposited in the bank, but he didn't return all of it. And then when Blackjack Dylan learns that his money is missing, he knows Wade has it and he's coming for it. So that's the first act. Just based on, I know he wants to keep it a secret, doesn't want him to learn what's going on. And then of course, the antagonist is trying to find out where the money is, and now he's coming for him. And then you get to the first plot point. So then what would that be like? Well, first thing I came up with was this right here. All right. So in order to keep Dylan's men from finding out where the money is and where his family is, Wade ends up having to kill one of Dylan's men, which only draws more attention and forces them to go on the run. So in an effort to keep his family safe, Wade has to shoot someone, and then now they're on the run. And then this is what you would call the fun and games if you're, say, the Cat fan. This is all the stuff that would be in the trailer. You would have this part here, and then all hell would break loose. And now you have doing. So it's predicted. Okay, so if in the first act you're going to do all this learning conflict, then in the second act it's going to be doing, which is essentially just running away, right? So they're on the run. So how does running from something create conflict? And you always want to make sure when you do these sort of things is it's like the doing part is what's creating trouble. So I just riffed for this. This one's really simple. For the first time in their life, the Montgomery clan found themselves on the run from a gang of bounty hunters. They were so focused on getting away from Dylan and his men that they lost track of where they were going and got lost. So I had a ton of stuff in here because, again, the beginning's super easy. But now you can already see in the second act, it's like, all right, well, that's a little light, but I can see that working out. I just don't know if that's going to last for half of the second act, but it's good enough for now. So because they're so focused on running away, now they're going to get lost. And then I wasn't really sure what the midpoint was going to be, so I skipped it. And I went to the obtaining part. So it's like they're running away and they get lost. And then now something about securing freedom is going to be the second part of the second.
Jim, I have a question. Can I just ask one? It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, just tell me, is this sentence, how does securing freedom for others, is this calculated or is it written by you? So, because obtaining can be anything, or, yeah, is this calculated?
So the obtaining is calculated, and then for every thematic issue you see here in bold, right here in the thematic conflict, there are, depending on the word, a couple hundred or maybe 1,000 different illustrations of what obtaining means. So
understood. Okay.
Catching a disease. So you can go anywhere. So maybe the family catches a disease as they're out running, and then that's going to go somewhere totally different. maybe they lose the ability, somebody gets hurt, they pick up ranch hand children, now they're saddled with more children. Actually, that's a cooler idea. So then you would click on that, and then that generates even more ideas, but you're still tied to the meaning of the story. That's the cool part is, oh, wait, let me try this, but you're still thematically tied to the meaning of the story, which is once you stop running away, you can achieve things. It's just going to be bad for you. So yeah, great question. Great.
Thanks.
Jim, I have a follow-up comment. Could you explain in their first signpost of learning how it's not like you're just saying people learn stuff and people teach stuff, that you're actually trying to like how did you arrive at that explanation, or you could use obtaining here, of how these things represent the conflict of learning?
That's a couple hours discussion.
Okay.
But in my short answer, Mr. Dusenberry, is that I know that trying to learn something has to be problematic, so that the act of learning something is difficult, kind of like teaching this class. So I know that there's money, he doesn't want anybody to know about it. And so he's going to do things to keep people from learning, but it's going to make things worse, because when you try to keep things a secret, it's going to make it worse. I'll get to I think what you're probably asking is what this thematic conflict is going to be, which I'll get back.
Like basically, how do you write around this conflict? That this conflict exists beneath the surface, and everyone's like trying to do other things to avoid it, but it all has to do with learning.
Okay, I have your answer. Let me do the superficial stuff first.
Cool. And
then I'll circle back to John's answer. So, I should probably point this out. So the way Subtext is set up is, this is the superficial storytelling on top, which is the part I'm filling in now, just with my ideas. And then down here, underneath the surface, which is what this clever little round thing here is, the actual thematic conflict that's driving the story, this story beat. And you can see here, there's 4 items. There's the issue of it, what it's really about. Then there are these 3 atomic properties. We're not going to talk about these other 2 today. That's for more detailed stuff. But I'm going to go over what each of these means here, which is how is learning presented as a standpoint, which I will get into. Of course, as always, if you had questions or you weren't sure what it was, you get the answers here to what it is. And then, of course, any sort of examples that are from films that I've actually written, we'll go over it. Or you can check out all these other ones that have the same exact beat in their story. But I will definitely circle back to that. I'm doing like superficial storytelling first, and then I'm going over my process for going through it, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes. Okay, so let's see. Are there any other questions here? No, just okay. All right, this is cool. All right. So again, I chose the kind of like, all right, securing freedom, not really sure where that is. So Wade and his friends were on the run so quickly that they didn't even have time to grab their horses. Essentially, like the outlaws catch up with them and they corner them in a dead-end canyon, which I know you've seen a billion times. And we can hear the sound of them reloading their gun. Wade orders Austin to run. They have to make it to town. They had to do it fast. They would be killed if they didn't reach him in time. But when he hears the gunshot ring out behind him, Wade knows he didn't make a convincing enough argument to Austin. Oops, that's the other one. Okay. And so then I knew how I wanted the second act to end, which is that Wade actually kills someone. So as they're running away, he's trying to tell his son, don't do anything, don't do anything, don't do anything. And the kid's so excited, he gets stuck or he gets lost or whatever. And so he's going to be the one that kills somebody in order for them to escape. So that looks like this. Yeah. And it's the first time he's ever done it. So Wade's worst fear comes true when Austin kills a man to save Charlotte. and help them escape the canyon. It buys them time, but at a price. The young Austin would feel no remorse for the man he killed. In fact, he would brag about it to his friends and family. All right, so that's just my general idea. And the reason why it's cool is, generally speaking, if you can tie the second plot point to the first plot point, thematically, it kind of makes the story work out really nicely. So in other words, the dad does it here and he doesn't want to do it. And so because of their journey through here, then the kid does it thinking it's okay. And so now things are getting even much worse, and you can see how they're kind of tied thematically together. And then for the understanding part, at the very end, so they've gone through trying to keep it a secret, then running away, and then they get caught, but then they break out when the kid kills. And now the dad knows they're always going to be on the run. I've got to stop them. So he puts the kids on the train and sends them out and goes to face the Blackjack gang all by himself. All right. So that looks like this. So Wade puts Austin and Charlotte on the next train out of town and awaits the Blackjack gang. He was no hero. All he could do was try. There was a time when every person must decide whether to fight or flee. If you run, you might survive for a while, but the situation will be waiting for you like a shadow at the end of your trail, growing longer and longer until it catches up to you. Again, it's not a completely original. Dylan and his gang start shooting and Wade returns fire. Wade was a former soldier and wanted to protect his family. He knew he had to start shooting and killing if he was going to save his kids, but before he knows it, Austin appears down an alley and starts firing his pistol, joining his father and taking out the Blackjack gang. Wade had a decision to make, and he was hoping that his son would be able to keep himself out of trouble until Wade could get the shooters. So Wade did the only thing he could do to save his son. He shot him. So I'm not saying he's going to kill his son, but like shoot him in the leg to keep him from, keep him from joining in. But even that doesn't work. And eventually they work together to finish off the Blackjack gang. And now everybody knows them as the Montgomery gang, which is this family of killers. But really they're not. And now they're always on the run. So that's my story. The only thing that's missing is the midpoint. Knowing that it's supposed to be some sort of action, I just added this thing where Wade and Austin actually get into it in a fist fight here. Let's see. So Wade and Austin get into a fist fight. Wade wants to keep Austin from killing again. Austin wants his father to start embracing what it means to be a wanted man. But that fight is what ends up making it so they get caught. So that's just the basic middle point. So as I thought it worked nicely with dad doing this, then they get into a fight, and then the son does it. So it's a nice progression. And right there, it pretty much took the same amount of time. So pretty much like 30, 45 minutes. I had the complete plot for the story in a general sense. So I know like what happens in each act. And this would be enough that you could write this up as a synopsis and send it off. And then at the same size, you could then go and look at the main character and see what they're going through, see what the influence character is challenging on, and then of course their relationship, how that grows. But again, we're just going to focus on the objective story here. Any questions about writing a complete story in like 45 minutes? All right. Oh, somebody raised the hand. Perfect. Okay, cool. Lasidi, is that how you say it?
Lasedi, Jim.
Lasidi, okay.
Yes. So I wanted to ask a question about the influence character. I've been like watching a lot of the writers' room sessions and the conflict corner sessions. And I wanted to know, does your influence character have to absolutely interact with your main character? Could it be a situation where your main character's influence character lives on a different continent, perhaps, and this is somebody that they know of, but not somebody they've actually met or interacted with?
That is a great question. And the answer is yes. They could be on different continents. They could be on different sides of the continent and never interact. The best example of this is Sleepless in Seattle, where complete love story, but they never meet until the very end. And the reason why is because when you look at main character, influence character, relationship story, it's not the characters themselves don't matter, it's the perspectives that matter. So the reason why there are 4 through lines in a complete story are these 4 perspectives, which is all the 4 different ways we can see conflict. I, you, we, they. I is main character, you is influence character, which is where you get you and I are both alike. We is their relationship, and then they is the plot. And the reason why everybody loves stories, and the reason why they love complete stories, is because you get all 4 at once, which is something you can't get in real life. So yeah, absolutely, you can have somebody else, you can never meet the character, and it's just their point of view. Like they're really passionate about being wanted or something, or you could have a famous outlaw be the influence character, and maybe the kid is just talking about what that character is talking about, or kind of says the things that that outlaw used to say way back when. And then that is the challenging part, because as an author, all you care about is that dramatic argument between the two of them. So if I went back to the story, all that matters is this dramatic argument between those 2 points of view. So anybody can do it, even if they never meet. So yes.
But
Right.
Just to give a clearer vision, because in Sleepless in Seattle, they meet at the end. But
Right.
is this necessarily do they have to meet at the end physically or at any point? No. Okay.
Yeah, because the meaning of it, that's the great thing about this approach, is I have a meaning that I'm trying to get across, trying to say something about how to live your life, or how best, well, this is this is a warning of how not best to live your life. And then how you illustrate it is completely up to you. It's just, if that's the argument you want to make, then this is the kind of stuff you should be dealing with.
Okay.
It very naturally balances all that out.
It's more about, if I could chime in, how the audience pieces it all together after watching or reading.
Oh, and yes, exactly. Yeah, it's you're basically just the author talking to the audience, and you're just using the story to communicate it, and doing it in a way so you don't have to go to each person individually. You have a story that is the framework for what it is you want to say. And then Nick put up in the chat, the conversation is another remote IC example, which I haven't seen in a really long time, so I can't give the specific example illustration of it, but I do recall that that's another good example.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for doing the raising the hand thing. That's the first time that's ever happened. Pretty cool. All right. So, all right. So now I know the general idea of it. So let's do John's question, which was, how the heck did I come up with that? All right. So this was the illustration part, and this is likely where most people are going to start. Because I've been doing this for a really long time, I actually started down here in the learning part, and I saw learning as a standpoint, and that's going to create potential for growth. So then my mind started calculating, oh, I know what that's going to look like, and how is that a problem? How does that create some kind of conflict? And the thing I came up with was this, which was, lying about what you've done in order to keep it a secret only draws more attention to you. And the only thing you could do then is pile on more lies, which then just stacks the deck against you. So that was my idea, was learning as a standpoint or some sort of fixed opinion is, oh, I'm just going to lie about everything and make sure people don't know where I'm at. And then that creates more potential, because when you do one lie, then it's going to be even more lies. And so that was the start to how this came out. So this is the really, really cool part that I'm very excited about for 2022. I actually just did this part and typed it into my manual way of doing this so far. And then machine learning AI technology wrote this. I didn't write this. Yeah. So there were some words, character names and stuff that I had to change around to make it readable. And of course, then it's not perfect. It's like 80%, and then you have to massage it. But absolutely, you'll notice some of the writing's a little stilted, or at least it's not my voice. But that's absolutely where Subtext is going, where you'll just be able to type in this, and you'll tap a little button, little magic button that will then give you about 10 to 20 different options for this, and then you can just pick that and build on it. So all
about that. Could
What's
you?
that?
I have a question about that. Could you do it for the thematic conflict? Could the AI? Does it have enough info? Your AI? Because I think, at least as an author, I would appreciate it the other way around. Where I don't have to think about that stuff. It gives me 24 options for the thematic conflict.
I'm sure there's a way to do it. Yeah, absolutely. Or if you jotted down ideas, and then it's, well, this is what it is. Yeah. So this is the plan for Subtext in 2022. You don't necessarily need it 100%. I was just pressed for time. So and I thought it'd be cool to try it out. And then that's what it was able to do. I'm going to get this right. A CD?
Almost there, almost there. Just to piggyback off of John's question, just thinking about how you guys wrote the stories in Conflict Corner, there was something that you were doing when you were working on the thematic conflict. You'd write the illustrations based on, I think it was knowledge, thoughts, ability, and desire, which I'm trying to understand how would that play into illustrating the thematic conflict over here. Is that like the next level in the quad? I was just wondering about that.
Yeah, I'm totally getting into that today. That would be the next step down, which is the scenes, the individual scenes that you can then take those and then come back up if you wanted to. So what I'm doing here is like a general sense. So I started with, father, son, and then at the end, the son becomes an outlaw. And then now what's the process of like, okay, so I'm going to build this, and I know what this act is going to be about. And then when you get into scenes, it's going to be in more detail, which will then come back and reflect what you want to do to be able to change the meaning of that.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Chat. Oh, and then Peter said Sauron might be an example. Oh boy, this is going to be a question for John. Sauron might be an example of an influence character who never meets the protagonist. Their battle for influence over Middle Earth lasts for 3 books, but they never meet personally. I'm pretty sure that's not Peter Jackson.
He's not the influence character. He's the antagonist. But theoretically, what you're saying checks out. That if he were the influence character, yeah, that's a case where there's a figure, a character representing a perspective that no one ever actually meets.
Yeah, in dramatic theory and in subtext, the protagonist and antagonist are different from the main character and influence character. So the protagonist and antagonist are solely in what's known as the objective story plot here. So that's why I have the dad as the protagonist and then Dylan Blackjack as the antagonist. But then you have this complicated emotional argument or emotional dynamic, which is going on between the main character perspective and the influence character perspective. So that's the difference between those two. You can have the influence character be the antagonist. So like the Joker in the Dark Knight absolutely is the same thing. And then that creates a villain is what it would be called. But for the most part, if you split them out, you get a more complex and sophisticated story. Okay, so let me go back to my coolness here. All right, so then that was this part. Then in the doing part, again, all I did was figure, I know that, let's see, what's the doing one? Oh, yeah. Oh, actually, John, this would be an example of one where it went reverse. Which is
cool. You wrote that first.
Yeah, I wrote this part. I mean, I wrote, I think I just wrote Montgomery clan running away and they're being chased.
Nice.
And this was one of the things. Running from danger is one thing. Running without any sense of where you're headed is quite another. And then I was like, oh, cool. So they're so focused on running away, they don't, and then that creates even more trouble. And getting lost is sometimes worse than what you were running away from. So then they could go into Indian territory, all kinds of stuff that you would be into. And then this one here, this one was the one that I really wasn't sure, which is funny because everybody I ever work with, the second half of the second act is always the hardest, which is the exact same part where I had an issue. And for this one, I had, oh, actually this one I had to redo just on my own. This was not any clever AI, which was Wade finds it impossible to take control of his family when all he can show for his efforts is to run away. Austin wants to convince his father that he has what it takes to convince his father that he has what it takes to take care of himself, and kills to prove it. So this one would be one where I did use human technology to figure this out, which is obtaining in terms of a mentality, which is the idea that a mentality is like how you think about things. So in the first one, in learning, we had a standpoint, which is a fixed attitude, which is what you think. So lies. Okay, so then that creates conflict. In this one, it's activity, which is easy. So they're on the run. All kinds of activities get them into kind of trouble. This one, mentality, is how you think. So dysfunctional psychology is it usually comes through as trying to manipulate or convince someone. So then I was thinking, all right, so then taking control of the family in order to manipulate the other, how does that work in terms of this scene? And so I would likely even investigate it even further, but just the idea of like, well, I'm going to show him what I can do. I'm going to take control. And then how dysfunctional your family is when you don't even do anything because you're always running from trouble. That's where this one came from. And you can see, well, no, I don't want to get into details. Okay, so then the chat is just people messing around. Okay. Then, oh, and then the last one, the understanding one, that one is pretty easy because it's like the ending of it, you finally understand, okay, this is what I need to do. And so the thematic conflict on that one is this thing here. Appreciating that they have, excuse me, nowhere left to hide. Wade turns and faces the Blackjack gang on his own. Unfortunately, Dylan and his men arrive before the train can leave, which only makes the situation more enticing for Austin to join in. So that's looking at, okay, how can I create conflict between everybody in terms of finally appreciating what's supposed to happen in terms of situation. They can't leave. Maybe I just came up with maybe the Blackjack gang blows up the train tracks and the kid's stuck there. And then eventually the father, even though he tries to keep the kid out of it, he finally appreciates having him by his side. And then the two of them finish everybody off. And then they transcend that into a really dark place. And so again, this one,
Jim?
Yeah.
This is Angela. I have a question. This is a bit confusing, the situation where you have the understanding, which is in the objective story, and you have this situation, which is because the objective story is in the doing.
Mm-hmm.
In the story, and then you have situation.
Right.
How the situation come into play here?
Let's see. Show you. Let me do. What would be the best way? I'm showing you all this at once. So for every single story beat, there's either going to be a situation, an activity, a mentality, or a standpoint. So if I come into universe here, so universe, physics, psychology, and mind, which are really technical terms. People are like, oh, what does that mean? So a universe is a situation. So it's like people stuck somewhere. Physics are activities. So like punching, kicking, fighting. Psychology is that mentality, which is a way of thinking, like how you think, whether or not you're manipulated, that kind of thing. And then mind is a fixed attitude or a standpoint. And those are the 4 different ways that you can classify conflict. I would challenge anybody to send me, you can put it in the chat or whatever, any kind of conflict that isn't one of these 4 things, either a situation, an activity, a way of thinking, or a standpoint, because that's how our minds work. And that's how we project everything we see in the world is based on these 4 classifications. So what happens in the story form is for every set of 4, they each get tagged with one of these 4. So it's not what you're thinking about, oh, it's a different domain. So universe is a situation. How does that hook up? It's actually the idea that for every single, do I have it in here? This is close enough. For every single set of 4, so 4 acts, one of them is going to be a situation, one is going to be an activity, one is going to be a mentality, and one's going to be a standpoint. The same thing happens in the scenes, which you'll see as I break it down. And then within a scene, there's going to be something in the scene that's a situation, something in the scene that's an activity, something that's in the scene that's a mentality, and something that's a standpoint. So it's this kind of fractal nature of how we classify problems, brought all the way through the entire narrative, which are the through lines, then each act, so you have the 4 acts, then in each act there's 4 scenes, and then in each scene, there's each of these. And then when you get down to the bottom of that, then it loops back on itself and goes back up to the top, which is why in a series, a television series, you have a story form for the series, you have a story form for each season, and then occasionally you'll have a story form for every single episode. And then that's how it works. But when you're looking at that one episode, you lose sight of the bigger picture. You kind of have an idea of it. That's the idea of it. So the answer to your question of, oh, how do I see the universe as a situation that doesn't make sense? Just know that at every level, one thing's going to be a situation, one's going to be an activity, one will be a mentality, and one will be a standpoint or fixed attitude. Does that help a little bit?
Okay, so in the objective story, the last act will be about the situation, or everybody's in a situation, sort of, and the activity, but the activity is still what's causing problems.
Hold on 1 second. I got lost because I clicked on the wrong thing. Can you ask your question one more time?
No, yeah, and the objective story in the final act, where you have a conflict of understanding, is everybody are in a situation then, because it was a situation thematic conflict. I'm still struggling with that. So everybody's in a situation, but the sort of act of understanding
what you want to do is think of
is what's causing problems. Or
what you want to do is think of these 4 things as the thematic material that's making up this. So this is what's underneath. So the way I read it is, how am I going to write understanding as a situation? Which is, so the understanding, it's in bold for a reason, and it's big for a reason. That's the most important part, because it's the appreciating, oh, when he sees his son shooting and killing people, and then seeing his daughter, and understanding the situation that's going on around him, now we have to work together in order to get out of this. So that colors this act so that it's not just this completely open-ended thing. You have a little bit more of an idea of what it is, and then even more sophisticated ideas with these other 2, which are a little more complicated. But for right now, I just I'm gonna write understanding the situation. And that's why in this one, it's almost, well, why isn't this situation? Because they get trapped. But you can see how this is much more interesting in terms of the story, to have obtaining come through as a mentality or some sort of manipulation, like I'm going to control the family, because in that part of the narrative, at that stage in the development of the story, you want to be going over this stuff so that you can get to this stuff. And this is like this because it's the narrative is trying to get you to the point where you can get that feeling of like success. So they succeed, but then everybody feels horrible or it's a bad thing. That's why these are lined up the way that they are, because you'll notice these are kind of out of order. So when you click build a story in the premise builder and it starts spinning that cube around, it's going through and taking what we do. It's a model of taking what we do in a split second and then breaking it out into about 40 steps, but changing everything, flipping around stuff so that you get all that tension all wound up. And then the story is just kind of unleashing all that tension based on what it is that you're trying to say. So obtaining as a mentality, the easy one is doing as an activity. It's like, oh, that makes perfect sense. And then learning as a standpoint, you know, like an attitude towards things or what they think. I don't want people to think of me at all. How does that create potential for growth? That's how I think of that. Yeah, because the last act is a shootout. Yeah, because it's like, oh, it's a shootout where they're trapped. They can't get away. So that's why it's generating all these ideas in my head, like, oh, okay, so then appreciating that there's no way out. We've got to stand and fight. Like, that's the cool. It's why it works. And we don't have time to do the main character, influence character stuff. But just the fact that it ends in a place where it's not a triumph and everything doesn't work out great. It's set up this way to give you that feeling of like, oh shoot, everything didn't work out.
Could I ask a
Okay,
follow-up
thanks. Yeah.
question?
Yeah. Oh,
What-
you can have many questions.
Was it, what was your question about how is it understanding a situation at the same time kind of thing?
Yes.
So if you think about what Jim illustrated here, it's that, you know, the situation is that basically they're stuck as the Montgomery gang, right? This is the situation. They are who they are now. This is where they are. And specifically, conflict comes from the fact that they understand that they're stuck as the Montgomery gang. Right? It's that,
Okay,
it's that
yeah,
whether
yes.
they want to or not, they're stuck as the Montgomery gang. People know them as that now.
Okay, yeah. Thanks.
You have always a hierarchy, yes, for something like a system. You have the big one, then the second one, and an understanding of these points. Yes, because I didn't know what Angela meant with her question, but now I understand what she meant, and I understand the answer. So okay, thank you.
Yeah, could you do that with the others as well? Because to me, it's always been like, how do you blend those two I don't know what you call them, elements now, situation, understanding, and it kind of does my head in. So that was a really cool example. Could you do the others as well?
Yes. So what's going to happen, for those who don't know, John Dusenberry helps me out immensely. And he runs the Conflict Corner, which is a class that's part of Subtext, like an hour or so every week, where he goes into all this stuff in great depth. So what John's going to do now, he's going to explain how obtaining. Do you want to start at the beginning, or you want to start?
Yeah, either one, sure.
So obtaining is a mentality, and we'll just go through each one. So go ahead.
So you wrote here that Wade finds it impossible to take control of his family when all that he can show for his efforts is to run away. Austin wants to convince his father that he has what it takes to take care of himself, and he kills to prove it. So he's, you could think of this as a conflict of, he has this way of thinking, right? That, oh, if I can just prove myself, I'll show him, right? And that's like how he thinks about things. And the conflict comes into the struggle over obtaining, like over achieving something or possessing something right? That he's stuck with, he's stuck between, having to kill to take control of his family.
Yeah, like a power play.
Yes. So it's the way you're thinking about it that is causing the problems.
All right. Did we get that one? Cool. All right. Here you go. Easy one.
What is activity doing? So just, the physical things that you're doing. It's kind of the same thing. Activity and doing. It's almost redundant. Like it's just that all the shooting and running and stuff is just stirring up more trouble.
And then running away, and then that's really gonna save you. It might actually make things worse.
Right. The more you do, the worse it's going to get. And so, but you feel compelled to do it. So you're it's a double-edged sword. Perfect.
And then this one.
So learning and the standpoint that you have this attitude that like can't let him find out. Right. And so you're stuck with like, if the characters are trying to withhold information, but does keeping secrets like reveal and show them that you have something to keep? So you're trapped. Like, how do you do it? How do you hide something from somebody without them knowing you're hiding something and then want to pursue and learn more? It's this, you're kind of stuck, and it's all because your attitude that I have to hide this from them. It's like if you're in a relationship and you have a secret and you're like, you start giving too much information. You're like, well, no, I actually went to the store today. And you're like, I didn't ask you if you went to the store today. What the hell is that? They start investigating. They start wanting to learn. You're trying not to learn. You're just stuck in that mode.
That's a perfect example. Yeah. And then you just have to do that a million more times. Oh, okay. I'm going to be able to say it. Lassetti. Oh, I think I got it.
Perfect. Yes. So with the atomic elements, then will you illustrate them under the scenes tab? So there's the scenes summary and then random tabs under the thematic conflict. Will you then click on scenes and illustrate each of those atomic elements under each scene?
Funny you should say that. Why don't we go ahead and do that? Yeah, what Lassetti is asking is like, okay, well, basically, where do you go from there? So I have this basic idea of what this showed up. And I should add something which is really cool is this idea of him shooting his son. Like, I didn't come up with that. That was AI stuff based on understanding what needed to be done. And then it came up with this. But then I was like, oh, that'd be really cool if that happened. So that's very exciting. All right. So then you've done the acts. So we've got all the acts down here, and this feels great. And hopefully everybody can pay attention to the next set, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the first act, and then we're going to break out into different groups, and different groups are going to do the other acts, and then we'll write the whole film here in like 45 minutes. It won't be perfect, but it'll be really close, and it'll be really cool. So here we go, learning. So I have this, and then even if you were to sit down with this, it would be great for a synopsis, because you can mail that off, get feedback, and people are like, oh, that's really great. But then now you're forced to actually come up with the scenes. What do I do? Well, you can just click this scene button here. And what it does is Subtext goes out and breaks it down and says, all right, these are the 4 scenes that are going to be a part of that learning. And we'll tell you the thematic issue that's supposed to happen in each scene. So for the most part, these words mean what you think they mean, but there is a bit of a definition thing to go over here. So in the beginning, work is applying oneself to doing what's in your ability. So when you do the work that you can do, like maybe your day-to-day job, that's work, right? I'm cool with that. But then sometimes you get complacent, and that creates issues. Attraction is when you're drawn to something, that's pretty clear. Repulsion is the opposite of that, being pushed away from something. And then the last scene is going to be something about attempt. So applying oneself to something that you don't know if you can do or not. And that's the opposite of work. So whenever you read about anything and somebody says, well, I need to you need to turn the scene or you need to turn an act, and they, well, how do you do that? And they positive, negative charges. The way you do it is whatever thematic issue you come into a certain context. So in this case, an act, you turn it because you just go to the opposite at the end of it. So the reason why this feels like an act, when it feels like it's moving, is because this last scene is the opposite of this first scene, and you just went through these two to get there. And then that turns the act. You're done with all this learning stuff, and then you go on to the doing. So Lissetti, you raise your hand. Do you have a question?
No, I lowered my hand, but
Okay.
I just wanted to know, so with you've got standpoint, you've got potential, and you have growth. Do they then factor into each one of these scenes?
Again, oh, that's a great question. You're going to drive yourself crazy trying to connect everything. So only 4 things at once. So in terms of the acts, these things have meaning. So in terms of the doing and the obtaining, the understanding, then the standpoint and the potential and growth have meaning in that 4. Right. I mean, unless you're super genius and you can carry that down, it's not gonna, in the same way that I can watch an episode of whatever my show is, current show, and not know what the entire season is about, but I can just love the current episode. Like,
yeah,
same idea, just focus on those 4, otherwise you're going to go crazy trying to like make all these connections.
right.
Really overwhelming. So those 4 scenes, work, attraction, repulsion, attempt, now you can see here, and this might be easier for you to see how they play out within the 4 contexts. So the first one's going to be a situation, second one's going to be an activity, third one's a mentality, and fourth one's standpoint. And they're not always going to be in this order, but for a lot of times they will be in that order. All right, so then in the same way that I did all the acts, now I'm going to do these 4 scenes. And I had a basic idea of what I wanted, which was get the money. I don't want anything to do with it. Yeah, maybe I'll keep a little bit of it. And then, you know what? I don't want anything to do with it. I'm going to take it back, but I can't not give it all back. And then that's just going to set me up because now I've got somebody coming after me. So that was the basic idea, which I admit is not too enthralling. So then how do you build that out? So then in the first scene, how does looking for work for someone while keeping someone from finding out with someone create conflict? Actually, that's kind of cool. It's actually different than what I had, which was, where was it? Work. Oh, here it is. Oh, making the necessary efforts. So one of the ones, okay, yeah. So how does making the next necessary effort to get out of the situation create conflict? So this guy shows up on their doorstep, and how can I show work as a situation? So he clearly can take care of the money, and they've been presented this money as like, oh, okay, what are you going to do with it? It's created a lot of potential, but he wants nothing to do with it, but he can do just enough to get out of there, cover his tracks, and then get back home. And the storytelling I had was, I think I did something to this extent. So something very basic. It's not going to be 100% right, but I knew that I had that. And then there's this that came back, which was, actually, it says I. So this would be the AI brought this back, and then we just changed this stuff. Wade knew he could go to the sheriff and explain what had happened, but that meant involving the sheriff and the law, which would almost certainly lead to their arrest. He also knew what Dylan would find if he'd taken the money. Wade took the money and put it, well, he didn't put it in his pocket, but that's what the AI did. And then left the diner, no, left. I would change this to dead man. He didn't know where he was going, but he wanted to get out of town as fast as possible. And that I probably wouldn't do. So that's what came back. I would likely just take that out, and then they head back home. chat. Oh no. Okay, so John's leaving. All right, goodbye, John.
In 10 minutes, I'll be around, but
I don't know.
I have to jump to a meeting.
But it's all right. You already did something that was amazing that I'm sure will help.
Can I just ask a quick question about that illustration, which is making the necessary effort to get out of the situation? It's interesting that work is a situation, has the situation, is the situation. So did it automatically choose that one, or is this just a random coincidence?
Oh, no, it's not random. I saw work as a situation, and then when I went to go find, I think I probably just saw that and made
Oh,
the
right.
connection myself.
Got it.
And
Okay.
I clicked on it, wherever it is. There it is.
Okay.
So I just
That
clicked
would-
on that, and then, oh, okay. So actually, that's a really good point. You just pointed out something really cool. It'd be cool if I could look at these two and then choose that for you based on that. Might
That'd be
just
kinda
figure out a really cool thing that I can set up in there. So then we won't have to think at all. We can just have the computer write that story for us. So this isn't a great illustration of work, but it's fine for now, and I'll come back to it. It's okay. All right, so that's the first scene. And then, so the second one is attraction. So how does attracting unwanted attention while keeping someone create conflict? Well, that's really cool because I already kind of had that in my mind anyways. And then as an activity, and the attraction, this is what but okay, so that's cool, but I had a cooler idea because, all right, so dad takes the money and we're just going to do the least, where'd it go? Oh, I'm sorry. Do the least amount of work to keep safe. Just take it and hide it and that kind of thing. But then of course the son, hey, let's get into some trouble. And attraction, so attracting unwanted attention would be even better for somebody like Austin, is how could he bait the blackjack gang into getting into a fight? So then he steals the money in the middle of the night and heads to the town to return the money. So Austin heads to town to return the reward money in an attempt to bait Dylan and the blackjack gang into a war. His father stops him before he can get too far. So I took attraction as activity, and then when I went through attraction, I was looking, I like, oh, baiting, and then that made me think, oh, it'd be really cool if the son has some kind of cool activity to create resistance against the dad, just kind of taking the easy way out. Let me see if I can get them to come after me or something like that. So I just typed in this and then sent that off, and then this one's cool, it came back, which was this. Austin wanted to go to the blackjack gang and get them out in the open again. He wanted to give them a chance at evening the score, but he also wanted to force his father into taking action. It was here that Austin realizes he wasn't going to get his way. He was going to be stopped. What are you trying to do? Get yourself killed? So, maybe slaps him around because it was okay to do that in the 1890s. And then, there you have that conflict. So already now there's huge amount of conflict between the dad saying, I don't want any, but I'm going to just do the minimal amount of work so nobody can find out where we are. And then the kid, I want them to see who I am. I want them to learn that I'm somebody that is, you got to watch out for. And the dad trying to keep him from doing that. And so then I know that's what the second scene is going to be about, something at night, with the rain and everything. And then the third one was repulsion as a mentality, which again was, all right, how am I going to do that? And you'll notice like the third item of every 4 is usually going to be mentality, which is usually why it's the hardest thing to do, because it's easy to think of baiting a group and writing that as an activity. And it's easy to think of what kind of situation do they get into. But that third one, because it's usually a mentality, is where people get stumbled, because that's where the how you think and how can I show that as a conflict in terms of an external thing like repulsion. How does repulsion work into that? And I played around with this a couple of different times, and then liked snubbing someone. So I felt that was kind of interesting, because what I did is I looked back at the act and I knew that this scene here, after a sleepless night, Wade decided to return the money. So I know, okay, well, this was my idea before then. Actually, I think this is the AI's idea. And so he's going to take the money back. And so, well, what if it was a way to snub or to show how repulsed he was by his son, how repulsed he is by this kind of thinking, and a way to manipulate him? I'm just going to go back into the bank and just show you that this is not what you should be doing. So I did, this was the thematic conflict. So feeling guilty about taking the money. Oh, and I thought this actually worked really nice too, kind of repulsed by his own actions that he actually like stole. He heads to the town to return the money, all an act of snubbing Dylan and his men, actually probably, and showing that he wasn't afraid of them, something complex like that, or snubbing his son, some sort of repulsive thing that is, okay, how can I manipulate them into his son thinking a different way? And I sent that off and got this. This one I had to work a couple times because it wasn't completely perfect. Wade was so angry at his immature behavior with Austin that he set out to show him the right way to do things. Wade was so repulsed by himself that he made the trip to town as if it was him trying to figure out how he could get himself killed in some heroic and manly fashion, simply to spite Austin and show him how stupid it was to put your life in danger. There could be something really complex in there. It's a couple of different ideas in there, but I just wanted to keep it down for right now, or jot it down for right now. Yet his actions failed to repulse his son, and the lack of his son being turned away by the increase in danger and making himself a spectacle scared Wade to his core. So he went there to try and like prove to his son this is not, and all he did was get his son more excited about it. So Wade's action had been a foolish mistake and one that would cost him dearly in the days to come. And you'll notice I don't know exactly what's going to happen in that scene. I just have a broad thematic idea of what that's like. It's like just doing the minimal amount of work, then he's attracted to this sort of way of life, and then I'm disgusted by it. I'm going to keep you from learning what it is that it's like, and then maybe the son goes with him, and some altercations happen, and then finally, the attempt, which I picked. Something to do with comfort zone. Comfort zone. Oh, doing something outside one's comfort zone. Oops. There. So how does doing something outside one's comfort zone create conflict for everyone? And so in my head, it's like, oh, this is going to be the moment where dad's going to have to end up doing this. Wade has to end up killing somebody, which he never wanted to do, but he has to do it because the blackjack gang is on his doorstep. And so this one was actually easier. And in fact, I think I did this one before I did the repulsion one. Wade knew that if he didn't do something, his family would be dead. He grabbed his rifle and did the one thing that was well out of his comfort zone, killing a man. And then that comes up with this. The morning after the incident at the bank, Dylan and his men arrive at Wade's ranch. Wade knew that he had to kill to survive. He didn't want to. Oh, but as his father had once said to him, this wasn't a bear you could just wait for it to leave. I thought that was cool. That came back as one of the options. I figured that's some sort of Western thing that a dad would say. And then this is classic. Wade's heart pounded his chest and he felt sweat trickle down his armpits. He began to tremble and the rifle rattled in his hands. And then he fired. So you have this nice first act where doing the minimal amount of work, then the kid trying, because he's drawn towards something that creates conflict, the dad wanting nothing to do with it and being repulsed by his son's behavior, but then finding out that that's not going to turn his son away from it. And then the attempt, which is having to do something that's way out of your comfort zone. And then that's the first act. And then he fires and then they have to go on the run because now the blackjack gang knows exactly where the money is. That could be a first episode if you want it to be. Whew, okay, does anybody have any questions about that? Oh, cool. Please, please. Okay, so Phil raised his hand. Oh, and then John left right when I need him most. Goodbye, John. Yes, if you want to know more, you love the dulcet tones of John Dusenberry's voice. Conflict Corner, it's every Wednesday, generally speaking, in the afternoon. And then all the replays are in Subtext. All right, Phil.
When you complete the thematic conflict, what triggers the AI response? I'm missing a keystroke there.
Oh, because I haven't programmed it yet. This was just something I was doing manually, like in the back end.
Okay.
I wasn't even sure if it would work, but I just wanted to try it. And it was like, oh, cool. So in the meantime, you would want to do it manually with your brain.
The old-fashioned way.
The old-fashioned way, and then use that later. So the great thing about it is like, so all this stuff is coming, right, for storytelling anyways, but it's not random. There's actually something to it. It's like, it's tied to the meaning. It's all tied back to this, like this premise here. And then the order in which things are happening or trying to tell that story. And so it's really just like, you know, a way of generating ideas, but you still have to make the connection to, at least for now, you have to make the thematic connection between the structure or the story form and then the actual storytelling, what's going to come out of that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Of course. All right, chat. Okay, somebody else is leaving. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about what I just did in terms, I know it's like a lot and it's like, well, I want to make sure I don't do it wrong. If you write a story out of it, you can't really do it wrong. If you feel like you got something great out of it, then that's right. And then of course you can always, every subsequent stage, you can always add more onto it. But what I'd like to do is then, now that we know the entire story, so if I do, I'm going to put a couple different links in the chat. The first one is going to be pretty much the thematic stuff. Oh, I want to do this to everyone in the meeting. Okay. So this would be the first one here. Everybody should be able to pick that up. And that's just an overview of the thematic stuff. And then the second one I want to share is the outline. All right. This is the important one. Since not everybody has Subtext. So this one is the important one. This is the actual outline. And what I've done is I've gone in and share this here. I've gone in and put the basic outline of the objective story from beginning to end. So this is the one I just did really quick, the work, attraction, repulsion, intent, and work as a situation. Oh, we've just ran into all this money. What's the minimal thing we can do? Make it look like this guy just dropped the money off somewhere else, and then we'll go back home. Then attraction is activity. The kid sneaks off at night. The dad has to stop him. Repulsion is a mentality. Like, how can I get the kid to be repulsed by this kind of behavior and show him what it's like dealing with people like this? And then that changes things into, what would be really cool is the dad goes into the scene wanting to turn the sun off, but he gets so repulsed by maybe one of Blackjack's men who are in the bank or something. So then he starts to come into his old ways of doing things and then is disgusted by that. So that's actually a really cool way to do that. And then the attempt, he has to break out of his attitude of like, no, I'm not going to kill anybody. He kills somebody. So then you'll see in Act 2, what the narrative has predicted is fate, prediction, interdiction, and destiny. And so what that means is as they're running away, there's going to be some twist of fate, which is exactly, it's like bad luck, which will be some sort of situation. Then because they are afraid or predicting what's going to happen, they get into some shootout. Then there's some interdiction mentality, which could be where father and son get into some stuff. Interdiction is when you see where things are going and you try to keep that from happening. Usually, well, not usually, but sometimes when you try to stop something from happening, you just make it worse. And then the destiny is like, all right, this is just what we're destined to become. This is just, or this is where we're headed towards. So then they get into a fight and end up getting surrounded maybe in that canyon. And then you have the third act or third signpost, which is fact as a situation, security as an activity, threat as a mentality, and then fantasy as a standpoint. So this one's really cool. I love the fantasy as a standpoint because the kid gets to live out his fantasy of being a gangster. So that one's like super easy. Whoever takes this one, you have a gimme right there. The threat as a mentality, obviously security and threat. Security would be when they finally get surrounded and, you know, put up their defenses. And then maybe there's some threatening thing in the middle of the night. And then the facts of the situation, I don't know, maybe that's the facts of, I don't want to say too much, but maybe it's about dad or something like that. So then that last one is the kid getting to live out his fantasy, which is really cool. That to me is the exciting part about this process is I did this plot point first. And then when I went to go look at the individual beats that are there, this almost confirmed my intuition, my writer's intuition. Like, oh, by the way, this should be about some sort of fantasy element. Oops. Which is exactly what I had come up with. And then the last one is the coolest one. If you know anything about dramatic theory or anything like that, you'll notice that these are all mixed up. Anytime anything's mixed up like that, that means this is the most important scene, which is cool because this is the last shootout. And you'll see it starts out with a choice, which is really cool. I don't want to lead it too much. I'm sure everybody will do this one, but choice will show up as a mentality. Then, which is making a decision. Preconceptions about a fixed attitude is like, okay, you know, I know exactly how this is supposed to play out based on what I wrote, but I want to leave it open for creativity. So you have people's preconceptions coming up as a standpoint. Then there is some openness, which changes the situation. And then delay is like procrastination or putting things off. Essentially what Wade has been trying to do his whole life, and that turns into an activity. All right, so what I'm going to do should be really fun. There's 20 people here left, which is perfect. So there'll be, I guess, 5 groups of 4. I will split people out into breakout rooms, which it's set up. Is it set up? Breakout rooms, cool. All right, so I'll break people up into breakout rooms. And was everybody able to get this outline here? Hopefully. Okay, so and then you have a general idea of what's supposed to happen in each act. And the other thing too, not to get too deeply into theoretical stuff, but even though the plot points here are shown to be separate from these scenes, in point of fact, they are the space in between attempt and fate. So that's why I took this plot point and put it into attempt. So it can either go into this one or it can go into this one. You can do that either way because it has to be one of those. Same thing here with the end with the kid in fantasy. So the end here, you know, I have the last driver is likely going to be something to do with these last 2 here because that's usually where the climax of the story. And so it'll be 20 minutes. So everybody can work together and either talk about how completely complicated this is or just do, you know, 4 or 5 sentences, you know, not for each scene, but unless you're really creative, but maybe for each, you know, a sentence or 2 for each scene. And then I know, Nick, you just came back in. I'm about to break everybody out. I'm not sure if you, oh, and then of course the professional screenwriter leaves before all the work is supposed to happen. Hold on, let's do this here. In case you just popped in, Nick, this is the outline. And so I'll break everybody out do the best you can to come up with like 4 really great scenes, and then we'll come back, and then I'll go over them, and we'll finish building out this story. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. Yeah, I might have accidentally opened up more rooms, but let's just wait till everybody comes back here. All right, sorry about that. It was like automatic, and then everybody went back. How'd it go?
Pretty good.
Oh, cool.
A little bit. Huh?
You had the best group.
Sorry, it says like 30 more seconds, and then everybody will be back in here. Let's see. One person.
20 minutes were like 5 minutes.
It goes by very fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like an eternity for me here, because I'm like, oh, this is too long. But it's just to get the general gist of it. And then I'm going to go through everything, and we'll put it all in here, and I'll go over it all. So obviously it's going a lot longer than 2 hours. All right. Yeah. So don't click the open all rooms button again. Close that.
Jim, just a fast question. This scene generator, do you also have something like a, how to say, a menu where every one bit, like situation, potential, growth, is also shown with text and not like this one element, but divided or something like that?
It's like the whole thing? Is that what you're asking?
No. That every bit, that you can influence every bit of it. Because I don't have subtext. I don't know it. I see it the first time, so.
Well, part of this workshop is to get you excited about subtext, for one thing.
Okay.
If you want to do it manually, you can't. You can try your hardest. Don't, like for instance, if you go to the premise for, let's just say, Harder They Fall, right? This is public, and you can see all this stuff all you want. The stuff where the story beats are into like tagged with situation, potential, growth, all that stuff. That's something that happens at runtime, because there's a lot of complex stuff that goes into it. I don't do it. It does it on the fly. That's why there's a bit of a break there.
Okay.
So you can't really, you can, you know, there's a lot you can do on your own without, but obviously if you want the full power of it, that's where that would be.
Okay.
Because it's not something you can do in your head. That's why I built Subtext. You know, so for instance, the reason why this says crucial scenes experimental and then there's a long delay is it's actually calculating it right now, because I don't do it when I build the story because it's too intense. So see there, it popped up. And then these are the 3 most important scenes in the entire narrative that are different. They're kind of messed up. And anywhere there's something messed up, I always like to tell people, it's like if a life without a story is just a calm lake, and then you throw a pebble into it, and then boom, where it hits, that's these 3 scenes, and then everything else ripples out. That's the general idea. But you can take, there is a general order. If you wanted to do it on your own, it won't be 100% correct, but you could just take 4 things and just do the first one: situation, activity, mentality, and standpoint in this order, because generally speaking, most things are like that. Like you'll notice in the scenes that we have here, almost all of them, situation, activity, mentality, standpoint, situation, that's the general pattern, except in those crucial moments when things are really heated up, it turns around. So you could do this and just get a general feel for it. The place where people get into the most trouble, which I still haven't done a scene yet, but is their scenes will be all one of these. So that it'll be all activities, or it'll be all mentalities, and just people talking to each other. and then that's when a scene dies, when you don't have the 4 different things. But I'll get into that when we get into an individual scene. All right, so let's see. So, oh, I lost the groups. Why did I close that? All right, so group 1 had Anne in it, among other people. I don't know if Anne's still here. Do you have scenes?
Yeah, it was in our group was Charles, Irvaxis, and there was one other person whose name I can't pronounce.
Just
Okay.
Edif.
That's it.
Just Eddie, yeah. Just
Eddie. Eddie.
And
I forgot to say there should be one person who keeps track of everything. Does somebody have that?
we hope so.
I have that in our group, Act
Uh,
3.
Who's the person in charge of signpost 2? Or yeah, which would be Anne, or who has the scenes?
Well, I wrote some notes down, and if anyone in the group wants to jump in and correct what I'm going to say, feel free.
Is there any way, do you have it written out, like typed out, that you just paste it into the chat?
Oh no.
No, okay, no worries, no worries. I should have said that. All right, so fate is the situation. What was that scene like?
Tim, in 20
Okay,
minutes, that would not have happened.
Should there be more time, like 30 minutes next time? Okay.
If you want written notes.
Okay, what'd you,
I could type in afterwards. Okay, so the first one was fate in a situation. So under doing. So they were all running away, and they ended up in enemy territory. And this is what created a lot of conflict with everybody in the group, like, which leads to the prediction of what are we going to do now? What's going to happen? How are we going to get out of this situation? We have no clue. Now, that was actually difficult to illustrate. We didn't know quite how to illustrate it, other than maybe some enemies start infiltrating, something that they hadn't expected. So an enemy starts infiltrating the group, and it leads to them carrying on, taking off, which is interdiction. And I have written down, they're forced to change course, and they end up in very dangerous, like on a dangerous trail.
Okay.
And the trail leads in the end to destiny. And I had somebody that falls off the trail and then dies. That person happens to be quite important to the whole group. And now they're left with, well, there were 4, and now there were 3. I don't know. So unless somebody else wants to add something further in the group.
Yes. So in terms of, I mean, the part where we had to do prediction, what happened was we talked about them riding into like enemy territory, like kind of like a mountain or a canyon where Indians were, and then they come out, and then the activity in trying, and they basically start to help mount the resistance. And that now leads to them wanting to change course, and then we use just kind of like world building or whatever, and then they change course into, say, like a mine, just like gold mine or something, just trying to change course, and then they got in there, and then that basically was like where the the action scene, or basically like the current really was. And then Destiny, the standpoint, well, that's where I think Evax came with a nice idea, where he said, just imagine, them, and say the father and son, whilst as Wade and I've forgotten the son's name, and then they make their stand, even though they've been chased into the caves by the Indians, and then just whilst they were there, they had like an argument or something about, and that kind of like leads to them blowing stuff up, and then that's the kind of like the power of scene, where it's almost like, okay, you're supposed to be a man, or this is how men do things, or whatever, or the son trying to show that I can be a man too, and then things get worse as a result. Kind of like set up in where we had that in Fate. So that's like a setup, and then pays off in than destiny.
Ooh, okay. That's a really good point. I forgot that. Yeah, like whatever usually you set up in this first one gets paid off here. All right, so we'll go over that. Okay, so fate as a situation, running away, ended up in enemy territory, created conflict. So this is basically like bad luck. Bad luck, and they end up in enemy territory. And was the idea like kind of like Indian territory or something like that? That's usually the typical. All right, so just by running away, and then that's nice because that plays into the bigger act idea of, well, sometimes when you run away, just the idea of running away, you end up getting lost because you're not paying attention to where you're going. So that one feels really great. And then the second one, prediction as an activity, what are they going to do now? I agree, like prediction is, oh, what the heck am I going to do with that? Is it just people sitting around going like, oh, this is going to end up really badly if we don't do something, and then it's just a conversation. You never want the characters to be talking about prediction or talking about their bad luck or talking about introduction. This isn't like what characters are talking about. It's really about what's the thematic issue that you're covering, what's the material, what is it that is you're exploring as an author that's problematic. So unless I miss something, I'm not sure if this one really comes off as good, as opposed to something, not that it's not as good, but as opposed to when I would see prediction as an activity, it would be because the dad fought in the Civil War, and maybe he was on the West, so he was actually dealing with Indians. So he does not trust any of them, right? And so it automatically gets into conflict with them, trying to fix something before it gets worse. You know, so like predicting that Indians will double cross them. What's his name? Wade double crosses them first, or something like that. So that in that way, prediction is the reason why there's conflict, is because he's predicting what they're going to do, and then because of that, he actually creates more conflict. Like maybe even gets into, even though they weren't going to do anything, they're actually going to help them out. He creates more conflict. Yeah,
I think Evaxis wants to say something.
Yeah,
because I don't know where the raise your hand option is. I'm doing it manually. So, so first question, where's that option for future reference?
Oh, as far as predictions activity?
No, as far as raising the hand in this program so that I don't have to do it manually on the camera.
On, where is it?
It's reactions. Go to reactions. There's a button underneath that window.
Oh, that's an intuitive.
And yeah, it's a toggle. You have to turn it on. You have to turn it off.
Understood. So what I wanted to say is, when we were working on the scene, I had the idea before the Indian territory idea came out that they would end up in the gang's lair, and then they would be surrounded, that they would predict, oh God, this is gonna end up really badly because we are surrounded, shadows moving, people stirring up, and that would push them to do something about it, which would make it worse because that they would predict where they would go. That was kind of the idea that I had in mind. I don't know if this kind of thing is the right direction or is completely off track.
Oh yeah, that sounds great too. Yeah, I'm just trying to do the group, trying to figure out what everybody was coming from. But yeah, I'm so like for prediction, if I came back into so subtext here, and I broke those into scenes. Looking at, so fate would be bad luck. Being caught in an unavoidable situation, which is ending up in enemy territory. Then for prediction, the next scene would be, you know, predicting what a group will do. So, and then that's based on all the stuff that he had before. And so then they get into conflict and all that stuff. And then I think interdiction, I like the idea of, what was it, the mine? What was it? I think you went into a mine or something. Gold mine. I believe that was what it was. So interdiction is a mentality though. the reason for going in the gold mine would be, let's see. So saving a group from premature destruction, interceding on somebody's behalf. So if the kid tries to do something and they try to alter the future, perform an intervention, saving someone from a premature death. So maybe that's where they end up in the gold mine as a means of doing that. It's kind of weak. I have to think about. Go ahead again, Urvaxis.
So the thing is that when the rest of the group said this idea for the cave scene was destiny, I actually thought it as interdiction. My idea was the mentality of the kid thinking, maybe now I can block the route, and because I can block the route, that's it. And the father like, no, and they try to convince each other for fighting for the gun. But the important part is they try to convince each other to not do it, only so the guy gets shot accidentally and makes even worse trouble. I don't know if that's on the right course.
That's like on the right course.
But it can be proved, right? How?
Yeah, I actually just thought of something.
I'm all ears.
Said so almost all of these, the problem is they're kind of repeating, like they're the same sort of thing. And it doesn't always have to follow along exactly the protagonist and everything. You could have the antagonist as part of this as well. So the interdiction here, and especially as a mentality, could be somehow, I don't know how this would work, but if the kid and the antagonist end up and he's like, hey, you know, you're really good at this sort of stuff or something, and then it tries to manipulate him to do this. Actually, this would work really well. Or maybe one of the Indians that they meet or somebody else that they meet on the trail, maybe this person is perfect. The person that's going to end up dying here in the fourth one, fall off, maybe that person is just, although I'm kind of taking this from Old Henry, but just go along with this as much as you can. But you know what? You actually have something here that your dad doesn't have. And there's going to come a time when you're going to have to save him, you know, and I might be gone and you're going to have to step up because your dad just has totally lost it. And so you're priming what's going to come on down the line, and then also prime this thing where they're going to get into a fight later. So I would actually add that as a break from all the running away sort of thing. And most mentality scenes are kind of more intimate. They don't have to be, but more the conversation trying to manipulate or convince the person like, hey, I know you're not going to be able to change this way of thinking, but you're going to have to do something in the future, and I hope you have the strength to do it. Maybe he even gives him the gun. Like the dad said the kid can't have any gun, but he gives him the gun, which is great. And then the destiny point, I like this. It's funny because having somebody fall and then there's 4 instead of 3 could also work as the midpoint here. Like that, it's the same sort of thing that would happen in the middle, and then they're like, oh shoot, what the heck happened? But for destiny is, you want to make sure when it comes to a standpoint that the reason why this person falls off, or the reason why they die, or whatever they got into that situation. So here, yeah, altering the future for the better. So this would be where the uncle or whoever's with them gives him a gun to take care of things. Then the destiny one is, if you think that the kid is on, you as an author know where the story is going to go. And you know that this kid has a destiny. Either he thinks he has this destiny that's supposed to play out, or he's destined to end up in this no matter what. And then that driving force of what it's like when you feel like your life has a path and it has to go in this sort of direction. What are the attitudes that you take? So even I would say the fist fight that they get into is all about destiny. Not that he would say, it's my destiny to be a gangster. That's what's motivating those attitudes. And then in the fight or the scuffle, when that fourth person falls off, that would be great. And then therefore now we have, oh, now I know what this running from danger, making things worse, when, you know, maybe if you just stayed and fight, you wouldn't have lost your uncle and you wouldn't have ended up in all this other sort of stuff that happened. The doctor.
Okay. sorry, just edit for sure. I'm going to take out that one in the next class. So Jim, okay, so this is like for like a typical like movie scenario, but what if it was like in a novel, for example, where we have, you know, different points of view? Do we I mean, how do we apportion POV for, say, maybe the 2 or 3 characters for in the novel, and this is like in the OS, or do we need more story forms for the OS? I mean, for different characters or players, I think that's the word.
Okay, so there is absolutely no difference between a screenplay and a novel, except how you're writing the story. The way that stories work is the same in every single medium, anytime you're trying to argue a particular point of view, you have a story form. The difference comes with how detailed it is. So in a screenplay, you're basically just going to do the objective story scenes, maybe main character, but you're not going to do the influence character relationship story. You'll just do the main act beats because there's just not enough time. When you have a novel, you have time to do everything. And I've gone through several novels doing this process. And what you want to do is figure out what it is that your story is about. And I just recorded something yesterday about multiple story forms, but if the relationships in your story are arguing different thematic points of view, then you would have a different story form. So like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings has a bunch of different story forms. Whereas something like To Kill a Mockingbird has one story form. Even though it's like the greatest novel of the 20th century, it has one story form, and then you play out how you illustrate what it is that you're going through in this story form. You can bounce around to different characters. This is not character point of view. This is the author's point of view. This is your point of view as to what the story is about. And then how you tell it, how you illustrate it is completely open to your artistic sensibilities. That's why it's like, it's not a formula. It's just like open to whatever.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jim.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Revaxis.
So that leads me to another question, since I'm still not entirely sure on my own end, and I think you know what I'm going to ask about. Should I wait for your answer, or should I just do an attempt and then we'll figure out, just to be sure?
I would do an attempt first.
All right.
And then happy to help you offline, like just so that the workshop doesn't go for 6 hours.
That's it. I only wanted to know that. Thank you very much.
Of course. Yeah, I'm always available to anybody to help out. Okay, so that was really cool. So the fill group, did you guys do signpost 2 or signpost 3?
We did 3.
Okay, cool.
And yeah, and I have stuff, but I'm just I've been watching everybody else, so I give credit to everybody else.
That's fine. I know you, so that's why I said the fill group.
I kind of anticipated that. Steve, can you hear?
Yeah.
My group too. Oh, okay, cool. All right.
Yeah. The gang's all here. I'll post what I had so you can just add it. Can you see this?
Thank you.
So me and Tom posted something in there too. So I'm gonna post his too. So I guess if you want to just pick and choose whatever you want to use, but the second one is what Tom had. First one is what I had.
Wow. So then we have another group. Okay, cool. Wait, let me see. Hold on. It's not letting me cut and paste.
I don't know if Sue, you wanted to post yours too, or
I want to put them here in the outline here, because then what I'm going to do is make this available to everybody afterwards, so people can use it as a reference tool. All right, so there's that one is one version, so this is going to be cool, and then this is Steve's version, and then Mike Woolager group. Did you have something typed out? Oh, did he disappear? Shoot. Okay, we'll go back to that one. All right.
I'm posting it now.
Oh, what was that, Mike?
I'm going to post what we have now if I can.
All right. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go through Steve. Okay, so Steve, you can run it since I forgot that you're in the group.
okay.
Like pitch the 4 scenes here, this first version.
Okay. I think you posted my version twice.
I did. Okay, go.
The second one was what Tom had. So,
All right.
but I'll pitch mine, I guess. So, first one's fact. the family is cornered with nowhere else to run. I didn't really have an idea. I guess in my mind, they kind of just ran to this, like, I guess following the next driver would be the canyon or whatever. Either way, they were running nowhere else to run. That's a fact. Like, they can't go anywhere else. Then in security, one of Dylan's henchmen takes Charlotte. I also got that from, I guess, what was going to happen next. That's why I added that in there, taking her from the safety of Wade and Dylan. And then going on to threat as a mentality, Wade and Austin both sense the danger present, so they kind of proceed with caution. So their interaction with, I guess, Dylan or whoever the bad guy is like, you know, I guess manipulation or trying to convince him, like, hey, calm down there, buddy, you know. And then the fantasy is basically what you said, you know. Austin believes that this is what it is to be a real outlaw, and that's when he focuses intensely, and he's either does or is about to do the quick draw, and then where he kills one of the henchmen who stole Charlotte or whatever. But yeah, that's what I was kind of going for.
Right. Cool. I'm going to take all three and take the best of everything. And then I'll
Okay.
for everything and do them. So then, oh, excuse you. Tom was the next one.
Yeah. So Tom, go ahead.
Is Tom here to pitch it? No.
I'm sorry, I have to go now.
Oh,
because I'm from Poland. It's in the evening here, and I have to wake up tomorrow early. But it's very nice. Thank you very much to all of you, and thank you. And I'm joining next time. Also.
Yeah.
See you, Charles. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
I guess Tom's not here. He was here.
All right. Maybe Tom's gone, so maybe I'll hold off on that. I can't get it paste. I texted it to you. All right, let me get my phone here.
I don't know why it's not allowing me to paste it.
That's okay. You can use this technology. Do this. Okay. All right, so let me hold off on Tom's then. All right, and then do you want to pitch yours?
Sure. So what we have is, you know, going off of the midpoint where they were lost, we had them lost, but they find themselves in a canyon, and behind them, Dylan's men are coming to get them. And in front of them, they see that the town has been alerted. So they're stuck between them and have to do something. Now they're screwed. So number two, security activity. They see that a train is passing the town that they can get to before the law gets to. So it's not slowing down. They know they can reach it. So they race to get on the train. But Austin, who wants to, be a fighter, doesn't want to run, resists this. And so in the argument between the dad and the son, they miss the train and a horse gets injured. So now they are without a horse. They're down a horse. They can no longer get away, and they are still close to the two groups of people who want to catch them. Wade wants to run, but Austin takes on the mentality of threat and says, what we have to do is turn back and face them to show that we're tough so that they won't come for us. But he, of course, is naive. So in his posturing, one of Dylan's men sneaks behind them and grabs his sister, Charlotte, and threatens to kill her if they don't hand over the money. So the sheriff, though, is also there, right? He was from the town, and he says, look, we've got everyone in our sights. Things are under control. Everyone's just got to drop their weapons. Charlotte won't be killed. It's fine. Everyone's just got to cool their jets here. Austin, though, just believes that the law is the enemy, so he can't believe them. He shoots Dylan's man to save his sister, and now they have a horse again. So he steals the horse, and they all get on their horses and they ride off.
That's amazing. That was great. All right, so let's go through that. And I think is this the same? Yeah, about taking Charlotte. It's very interesting that both two separate groups came up with the idea of having Charlotte being grabbed and threatened security and threatened, which is where people's heads went when they went over that, which I thought was great. Okay, so obviously I'm going to go with the second one first to go over it, because there's this threat mentality is so good, and I love it because this is usually the hardest one to do. But the idea that Austin is driven to be more threatening as a way to manipulate or get them scared, to change the way that they're thinking and the kind of conflict that creates. So what's great about this is it took the threat as a mentality as being the driving force of the story beat, and then that is what created the problem. So there's no way Charlotte would have been grabbed if the kid hadn't tried to be threatening at that time. The other really nice thing about these four, although maybe not so much the first one, is they're all thematically connected, as if they're telling a small little mini story. So like the 1, 2, 3, 4 are all in the same sort of headspace of what's going on, as if you're like, oh, I'm going to go through this, and at the end of it, there's going to be a point of it. This fantasy standpoint, I mean, I had that idea of that, but the idea that, well, also bringing in the sheriff, which is great. So then there's more characters that are involved with the objective story, but the fantasy of being against the law is where he's taking it, and because of that, he can't believe that they would be a force for good or anything like that anyways, that he shoots and then now they're free. So that's taking that attitude of, I'm not going to give up my dream, and using that as this delusional thing that he could fight these people off. So, and those two have really worked well together, primarily because Austin was there. And
I just want to point out too, the second one also has that, because the reason he won't get on the train is because he won't do everything he can to avoid the problem. He wants to be in the mix.
Yes.
Yeah. So
then, okay. So then you said that. So then what happened here? I know this is usually the hardest one to do, but
well, we just thought about they're going to get caught.
Right.
And most of our talk was actually, we started with number 3 because we knew that one was going to be the most challenging.
Right.
And then we sort of just threw that one up for number 1 and never really went back to it and spent most of our time on 2 and 4. That's really what happened.
Because it's the same thing I did in the first act, where my work beat, which is not that exciting, but I will show how to make it exciting, or at least better. Usually that first one, you're like, let's just dump something in here. And that's the other great thing about this process, is you can start anywhere and it's going to all connect together at the end. So even though you did 3 and then maybe did 4 and then went back to 2, and then now you can come back to 1. And I would think, well, okay, so we have this really great fantasy standpoint thing here at the end. How does that turn what they were, what was going on in this area?
I mean, it's funny. The first thing I would do is I would try to make them opposition, right? The first one, stuck in a canyon, you're going to get caught, you're going to get killed or go to jail, is the opposite of what you want, right? So I would really play that up so that when they get to 4, it's the opposite. I'm in control. I'm shooting people. I'm bettering the people who came for me. That would be my approach to those 2 things.
And I would even bring into the fact, I mean, so the fact is, and I'm kind of drawing on the previous act, which was, there's this idea of the uncle or whatever saying, hey, you've got more to yourself than your dad's giving you credit for. That you could play up the fact that the kid did save them way back in the Indian place, and I should be in charge, which would be the situation. And, you used to be great and now you're just old and run down. Those kind of facts, which are undeniable truths, like it's like, no, this is really, to add in with just the situation that they're stuck, because the other 3 tell the story of Austin growing to a place where he's going to shoot somebody. So then you want to bring in Austin here into this first one too, so that they're all, it's like, this is the setup for then this payoff. We have a great payoff and all this conflict in the middle. And then the setup is like, hey, I'm a lot better than you're giving me credit for. And I can do something more, right?
It's why he would even fight getting on the train. I should be in charge, not you. So I should.
And like, and when in one, when the dad's like, well, what are you talking about? He's like, well, I just kicked your ass up on the hill. It's like, well, yeah, and doing that, you end up killing the uncle or whatever it is. It's like, but you know, who won the fight? And then that you can't deny that. And then that gives him more motivation, more potential in the next two scenes to take more and more agency.
Yep.
Where and he finally, which is great. So like that's what I'm saying. Like now the hardest part of a story usually, which is the second half of the second act, now we have something that's like really rich and really, you know, I could go off on this forever, but now it's almost 3 hours. Okay, Vax.
I'm sorry for intervening that much, but I'm really willing to learn, so I better ask. So for this fourth point, the fantasy standpoint, one thing that I'm struggling to see is if the situation gets solved, how does it move the story?
If what, I'm sorry?
If the situation gets solved, how does it move the story?
Oh, well,
isn't conflict the idea that it has to kind of get worse, or at least something has to not go right?
Oh, well, I would
I don't
say,
know. Maybe I don't understand how to do this properly.
yeah, I would say just real quickly, it doesn't solve it. It actually makes it worse because now the kid has a ton of proof. He's got a lot of validation that he can just do whatever he wants. And hey, you know, now they're really chasing me. It's what I've always wanted, to where now the dad's going to try and put them on a train, but that's not happening. Now he's going to jump off that train and be in there 100% because he knows he's built that up. And then let me just go over just really quickly so that it doesn't go too long. The family's cornered with nowhere else to run, can't go anywhere else. So the difference between these four and these four is that for each beat that's here, there is a, what kind of problems do those create? So this one is the same thing that's in the one that the second group did. The family's cornered with nowhere else to run, but can't go anywhere else. But then why is that a problem? Well, the problem is the facts of the situation are the kid, you know, can beat up the dad's run down, they're stuck because of what the dad did. And then, okay, now who's going to take control of the family? Because that's the whole point of this third signpost. Whereas, oh, some people are leaving. Oh, Mike's gone. Okay, well then Mike's gone. Thank you, Mike. The second one is Dylan's henchman takes Charlotte, taking her from the safety of Wade and Dylan. This is the one thing where using the dramatic theory or even subtext as Mad Libs, where you just take what's written here or even the storytelling and you basically just copy it, but you're not saying why is that a problem? Because as an author, you're trying to show, okay, well, when you use the facts of the situation to make choices or take actions, why does that create problems? When you try to do something from a place of security, how is that problematic? When you do a place from threatening, so Wade and Austin both sense the danger present and proceed with caution, is just writing threat. It's not writing why is threat as a mentality problematic. Whereas here, Austin is he's being driven to be threatening, and in an attempt to convince other people of that, as a, you know, like I'm building myself up, that creates problems because you want that inequity, those problems in every single scene. Because if you don't have that, then there's no potential for the next scene. It's always supposed to be off balance so that it keeps going through the narrative. And that would be the big difference between those two. Yes, Sir Vaxis.
So this reminds me, I was looking at your story form from the Prestige with the story beats, and I noticed there was a good bunch of those beats that look like Mad Libs. And is that normal? Maybe it's because the conflict is talked at the scene level. I don't know. I'm asking because I thought it was weird that not every story beat seemed like a conflict.
No, the Prestige project is a huge project. If you look at the objective story ones, they're a lot more built out. The one that you see right now for the main character is like a first pass, and there has to be more work on it to build it out to be something like this. So this is a great place to start, but then why is that a problem? So yeah, absolutely. You'll see it's like very sparse compared to the objective story. And that's just because of the nature of the project. So eventually it'll be completely in there, but you always want to make it, particularly in this kind of story, You want the plot to be as rich as it can be. The doctor, yeah, Dr. Ed.
Yeah, Jim. Yeah, so I was just thinking, just like an addition to subtext, do you want to create like a little, place for like free association, like a worksheet or something on the side, so that way people don't have to go to other, like Scrivener or whatever, to do everything in the subtext while brainstorming and writing and whatnot.
Oh, like a writing part. Someday that would be nice to do that. I feel like writers have their own particular apps that they love writing in. Like I can't stand Final Draft, but I know people do. Somebody does. So
Same.
I try to eventually I get that a headspace, but right now I'm just trying to do the structural and the story form stuff, and then eventually grow up to that. But that is a good idea for sure. And there was 2 hands that went up. I'm not sure which. Let's see. Whoever raised a hand, go for it.
Yeah, me, Jim Lasedi. So I was wondering, with dealing with illustrating the inequities, because I've been watching a lot of Conflict Corner recently. So it isn't always necessary to start with those 2 very general statements. You can start from the storytelling or the illustration and then work your way backwards to the inequity. I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, totally. Like you can use it as an inspirational jumping off point. And then it's basically like if you had given it to somebody to read, and then they're like, hey, you should cover this thematic issue here, and then look at your illustration and think, okay, is this threat as a mentality? Okay, not really. How can I make that more that way? You can go one way or back the other way. That's why in Subtext you have both spots where you can either put the storytelling, the more superficial stuff on top here in the illustration, which would be maybe that's where you start off. And then, okay, how is that prediction activity? And then this is where you would do all the deep thinking to kind of see if you're getting it across. But yeah, you can go, in the end, it's almost like writing and rewriting.
Yeah.
I personally like to rewrite before I write, but some people write and then rewrite. And then that's why we would do that. Either way, we're all going to go in the same circle. It's just, when are you going to jump on that carousel of writing and rewriting? Okay, more questions. Is there another hand that went up? No? Oh, okay, great. Okay, so then 4, group 4, which was, well, I know Phil was in it. Or, oh, no, it wasn't Phil. It was it Nick? It was Nick, wasn't it? Yeah. Nick.
Yep, number 4 is us.
Oh.
And it was Ohm, Daniel, Peter, and myself.
Perfect.
And we may be guilty of a little mad-libbing, but we shall see.
Okay.
So we felt that there had to be a reaction beat to the killing that happened immediately preceding between Dad and Wade, Dad and Austin, Wade and Austin. And so there is going to be an argument over like, what the heck were you thinking? As they get to their semi-safe place. And Dad is going to take charge. He's going to basically take the gun away from the children. They're going to be without weapons, and he's going to put them on the train. On the other hand, Austin and his sister are going to participate in choosing not to do what Dad says. So they're going to find a way to either break into some gun boxes or steal them from the store that Dad doesn't see, kind of lifting them, shoplifting or what have you, or pickpocketing or whatever. But anyways, they've got 2 guns as they go onto the train. And they are not going to be sitting still on this train. In the meantime, we see that the gang has certain ideas of the kind of person that Wade is, and they believe that he's a wimp, always on the run, And so they think he's going to be easy pickings, and so they're not as careful in going after him. And also, Dad has some preconceptions as to the way that he is going to. He knows that he has to deal with the gang, or the gang has to be dealt with in one way or another. And that's why he wants to get the kids shipped off. And he still has his belief that the kids, or at least Charlotte, will still listen to him. And so what's going to happen next is that we're going to get to, so the train, you had indicated that the train might be blown up, or the tracks blown up so that the train is stopped or something. And so we took advantage of that and said, well, whatever the gang did to stop the train from going, the kids use that as to their advantage, and they jump off, and then they're going to, they think that they're going to go hunt down the gang, but instead they find that the gang, they actually run into the gang with no plan in mind, and so now they're almost trapped. But I got to see what our next point was. Just a second. And Dad manages to shoot to delay the gang a little bit, or not delay, but Dad manages to stall the gang so that the kids can get away, and they join him. And now what we're talking about is what's Dad going to do, since his plan, and he had a decent plan, whatever it was, is now going to backfire because the kids are with him. And what he was going to do when the kids weren't there, he can't do now. And so he starts thinking back to his World War, or his Civil War days, and he is now persuaded, or he has come to the realization that he is going to have to go after the gang, and it's going to be modeled on some kind of war battle in the Civil War that he participated in, where his side won. So then, as the plan is set up, then Austin wants to rush in and start the fireworks early. And Dad says, no, you got to just wait. You have to do the dang timing thing, because otherwise we're going to just be shot down, and they'll have the advantage. You've got to wait for the right moment. And then the right moment comes, and from whatever positions they're in, they closed in on the gang. They are now pursuing the gang, and the gang is trying to get out of town. But the Montgomery group knocks them down, and this happens right outside the telegraph office. And the telegraph officer is trying to send out a notice saying that the train has been blown up, new gang in town, Montgomery, and then all three kids shoot down the wires. But we know that the news is going to get out, even though it's delayed. There's a new gang. It's the Montgomery gang.
All right. Thank you. Woo, that was exhausting. Great. A lot of, geez, you guys did this in 20 minutes. That's fantastic. Okay, where should I begin? All right, let's see. Okay, this one is really, really, really good. The preconception standpoint. So the gang, the Blackjack gang has certain ideas as the kind of person Wade is. They believe he is a wimp and always on the run, easy pickings, not as hard to go after him. So they kind of take it easy on him, right?
Right.
Which is what gets them into trouble. So that's a great example of they misunderstand. So the signpost is all about misunderstandings. So they misunderstand what they're up against because they think he's just this guy who runs away. They take it easy on him, and because they had those preconceptions, that's why they got into trouble. And then you've taken care of the story beat. That's totally fine. And then that gives strength to it. The choice one, I like this. Like, so what were you thinking? Take the, that scene about taking the guns, taking their choice away, choosing not to follow their father's way, breakdown. Oh, and then they end up doing that. I would probably hold off on this because it's kind of like, since he's the main character, you want to have them on the train and he thinks they're safe. And then he goes into this sort of scene. And then this is when the kids show up. So for the choice part, if you want to show what choices are problematic, unless what you're saying is the kids just are choosing not to follow their father's way as a means to show them they can make their own decisions, right? I think maybe that's what you're saying.
Okay.
They can make their own decisions and completely ignore him, right?
Right.
So this is one point I should bring up, and this class is probably going to go on for 5 hours, but I'm trying to wrap it up here. The story form as it is here, as it's laid out, is what actually really happens in chronological order of events from beginning to end. How you illustrate it, you can hide things and not present everything. So in this case, even though the kids make the choice that they can make their own decisions, that they're big enough to choose for themselves, and they're not, you can reveal that later when they pop up here. But just know that this is where it started. This is where it actually happened, even though you might be cutting away or have a different scene if it's a novel, writing about something else. So that this creates the potential of the choice as a mentality. It's not perfectly strong, but it's close. It's really close. And then here, the gang stops the train, use their advantage to jump off. They go down to hunt down the gang. All right, so then it plays out these last 2 scenes. I have seen where the final climactic change moment is usually in this openness situation. Like the third one before the ending is usually where Luke turns off his targeting computer, Neo gets shot, like that kind of stuff. The ending of the story is wrapped up in this place here. And if you think of the entire narrative and the idea of the father being open to actually fighting alongside the son, that's the kind of thing you'd want to have in here. So you have great stuff in here, all the storytelling, but there is a chance that what's really going on, that these beats are kind of repeats of the preconception or the choice. Not that there's anything wrong with them, not to say that you can just have one scene of preconception at a standpoint, you can have the different illustrations. But I would think in order to wrap up the meaning of the story, and this is why I got really excited, which was the dad is forced to be open to fighting alongside his children, because that would be openness as a situation and the problems that created. So that's why he has to shoot. He tries to shoot his son to keep him from getting there. So then this stuff going to backfire because the kids are with him. So this part here would likely be like somewhere in here. And then this important moment here, this is the whole meaning of the story, to where the father is arcing from avoid to pursuit. So not only is he facing up to the guys face to face, not only is he personally moving from avoid to pursuit, where he turns around and is going to face them, the classic story, but also that he's telling the son to go for it. So he tries to shoot him in the leg, and that's not going to happen. And then eventually he has his, leap of faith moment when he finally then tosses the gun to the kid so he can help him out. So then that is, it's kind of like Finding Nemo has the same sort of main character arc where the dad's like, no, 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 no. And then, hey, go have your adventure. That one's a little nicer. This one's a little more violent, but he's then giving it to him to say, go for it. And you almost always want that moment to happen in that third story beat here. In openness situation, that's usually where that transformational moment happens. And that potential had been there like all along. And he's finally recognizing that. He's reevaluating that and fighting alongside of him. And then I love the end with the telegraph officer. And the delay as activity is like, what can they do? So this would be where they pretty much finish off the gang, right? Finish off the gang here. And then that would be like the end, which would be like, cool, we saved the day and all this stuff is great. But then your idea with the telegraph officer, they're right in front of the newsroom. And then they're like, oh, there's a new gang in town. There's misunderstandings, I think is brilliant. I would have never thought of that. And then so they're forced to delay that by shooting. I mean, you gave a total reason to the ending of the story, which I didn't even think about, which is they're shooting all this stuff, blowing up all the wires, even though it's going to get out. And now they're like really a gang because of these misunderstandings. And then that potential goes forward. I thought that was a great, great, great ending. And which is something that I never would have thought of. Whew. All right. So any questions about going through the scenes? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this up, make it all nice and pretty so that everybody can see it. I still have one more thing, if you just bear with me real fast, that I can show you. Are there any questions as to, we basically just beat out an entire screenplay in like 2 hours. Well, I'm sorry, the plot, because you still have all the emotional concerns, which will make it heartfelt. And so there's still a lot more to do. But at least the plot, we know a general idea of where to go. Does anybody have any questions about that? I mean, I'm sure there's a billion, but any quick ones? No? Oh, Dr. Ed.
Yes. I was thinking in terms of, embedding the character traits in the OS scenes, how does that kind of like work out? And I know you're not a big fan of the archetypes again, so you spread the traits out, and then how does that play out? How do you, I mean I know it's up to the author, but I mean, like, how does that play out in a scene? Is it because some paradigms will tell you, oh, it's a scene just between two characters, or how does that all play out and so on?
So what, I hope it's okay to say Dr. Ed, but I probably should learn how to say names.
No, it's fine, Dr. Ed, it's excellent.
So what he's saying is, in Dramatica theory, in the objective story, all the different characters have different elements. They all have different motivations, which is this set of 64 elements here. And everybody gets one. And then that's how they're opposed to each other throughout the entire story. Well, a really cool thing in the original dramatic applications, you could then like drag and drop characters and put them in all the different spots. And that's really cool. I'm of the opinion that if you are in this workshop or you're putting all the effort into doing this stuff, you already have your characters intuitively, and that for the most part, people don't need that work. I think it's a great way to learn the elements, but when it comes to actually writing the story, the thing that everybody needs is to just start writing the story, which is to have some sort of intelligent outline to build a meaningful story from. So that's why I don't connect those elements. And I think, again, that's going to be not overkill, but you're breaking out of what are the 4 things I need to be thinking of now to then, okay, well, the protagonist is pursuit and consider, and the antagonist is avoid and recon. And it's just way too much. When you have an inkling, you have this drive to write a story, and you know pretty much where the characters are. So I would save that kind of stuff for maybe another pass or something, and just get the story down first, because they really don't interact with this in this context. They have, it's like the protagonist is driven to pursue and the antagonist is avoiding. And then somebody introduced the sheriff. So now the sheriff, I'm thinking, oh, is he like a contagonist who's like driven by temptation? It's cut of it. So cool stuff. And you can add to that. but I'm not connecting the sheriff temptation to all these different things. That's madness. It's just way too much.
Honestly, you're absolutely right. I mean, I've hit a brick wall trying to do that. So that's why I'm thanks for that.
Just do yourself a favor and only think of 4 things at once. So that's why I sent everybody off 20 minutes. Just do the 4 scenes. And nobody thought about anything else except those 4 scenes. And we got really great stuff. Okay, and then I think Urvaxis had another question before I break down this first scene.
So a question I have is, I am assuming this is a linear story, therefore the conflicts we've written are also linear. So my question is, considering this more intuitive manner of thinking about how to make conflict, how would it look? How would like any of these look? One single scene? How would it look if it was holistic? Just one.
I'm not doing
Something
that.
like that.
That would be crazy.
All right, I have tried.
That's a completely different thing. I don't even want to get into that at all.
Okay, I have tried, no problem.
I
had to ask.
No, that's fine. Somebody will want to have the answer to that. The story will be organized differently. The time will be different. It's a completely different thought process. I mean, you still do it the same way, but there's less of a, well, if this happened, then this happened. And it's more about just, I would just intuitively use these beats and I wouldn't be so methodical about it because it's more holistic. That's a totally different, I could do a different class on that and go over that stuff.
That would be awesome indeed.
Yeah, okay. So then just very quickly, the last thing I wanted to do, which was to show, so we did the 4 acts and then we did 4 scenes in each act. And now you can actually just break down each scene. So this first scene where they find the money, and we're going way back in time. If you just click break down the beats here for the scene, what Subtext will do is then show you what's supposed to happen in that scene from beginning to end. So these are very specific and very much about the scene where he's just doing the minimum amount of work to get out of, you know, hey, I found this money, what am I going to do? So really quickly here, you have certainty as a situation, deduction as an activity, induction as a mentality, and potentiality as a standpoint. I was a little bummed because these are the 2 worst terms to ever understand, which are deduction and induction. The visual way that I learned it is, well, everybody knows what it means to be certain about something and the kind of situations that puts you in. Everybody knows what it means to think in terms of your potential, especially if you're in this workshop, and the kind of attitudes that creates. Deduction is when you take this and you're like, oh, let me see what's in here. Let me get rid of everything and get to the heart of the matter. Induction is like, hey, you know what? We could do this or we could do that. And it's like inferring and it's making bigger. So that's how those 2 are opposing to each other. So in the same way that certainty is the opposite of potentiality, uncertainty is not the opposite of certainty, potentiality is. So that's how that scene turns. And then in the middle, those 2 are always, for the most part, are always against each other, because then that's where you get the turn in there. So what I came up with is, where is the example I did last night? Okay, so the first one, I mean, that one's really clear. And eventually you get to a point where it's almost like it writes itself. So absolute, oh, come on, absolute conviction about something. So, and I would probably say Wade has absolute conviction about something. We're not getting into this. We're not going to take this money. There's no way I'm even touching this, you know? So that would be this. Wade has the absolute conviction that they should not get involved with the outlaws. His son disagrees. And again, I just plugged that into the AI thing, and then it came back. Wade had told his son that they should not get involved with the outlaws since it would be dangerous. But now he saw his son's face and he knew that boy was totally convinced they should follow a different path. So again, it's not going to be perfect, but then you could just change it according to your imagination. All right, so that's the potential of it. 2 people very certain about what it is. So then now deductive reasoning. Well, what the heck does that mean? The one I picked was, oh, identifying the common element. identifying the common elements in a group. And this one I went back and forth on, and I thought it would be fun to bring Charlotte into it. So Wade and Austin start to get into an argument while Charlotte identifies the common element between both of them. They're violent, because I wanted to show deduction as an activity, not just this argument of them going against each other. So then this is what came out, almost as if Charlotte's saying this. I can't say I'm surprised. Wade and Austin have always been at each other's throats, but the only difference between them here is that Wade has a gun. Okay, so then Wade, brandishes the gun or something, or gets Austin to calm down. Oh, well, this is a little bit more. Wade draws his gun and points it at Austin. Austin makes a move to get it, and Charlotte screams. The two stop. So when they're there, there's some altercation. You're showing that the son isn't just gonna let go. And then meanwhile, there's this certainty of what they're supposed to be. Then Charlotte's like, hey, you know what? You guys are the same person, and you guys are both violent, which only makes that certainty even worse. So each beat is making it worse, so that we were certain, and now it's like, oh shoot, what if we're both the same? What does that mean? One of us has to be wrong. So then now the induction part, so that's the next part of the beat, is this one was actually the easy one. I think this is where I started, which is exploring the possibilities. So this would be where the son tries to convince the dad, hey, we should take it. This is really, we should really, this is a real chance for us. And so this was what I came up with. Austin spells it out for Wade, exploring the possibilities of what could happen if they take the money. And then the thing that generated was Austin tells Wade that it's a big risk. If they take the money, they stand to lose a lot, maybe even their lives. Actually, I would switch this so that it's Wade saying this. But if things go the way Austin has predicted, they stand to make a huge profit. So here's what we're going to do. Austin says, we're going to take the money. We're going to keep it. I'm not saying we won't give it back now, but we're now in a position where we can offer Charlotte a new life. Maybe she's sick or whatever. Real chance to make something of herself, a real chance for us. So the first beat is this certainty. Okay, we're not doing this. Then they start to get into a fight, and it's like, wait, one of us has to be wrong. Then the son takes that and moves with it. Hey, look at all the possibilities of what we could do. And then the way the scene ends is taking risks on, where is it? High risks on long odds. So the Wade agrees to take the high risk. So I was just doing this. Takes high risk on low odds, and they take the bank money. I think it's obvious to you by this point that Wade was in over his head, but he was no fool. He knew that if he took the money, he'd be the primary suspect and not just by the authorities. This would be a huge risk with high reward potential, but the odds of success were low, and Wade was still unsure whether Austin had actually given him good advice. So we're going to take this. It's going to increase our potential, but I'm even more bothered than I was in the beginning. That's how the scene turns. Like, no, I'm certain. And by the end now, I'm even more bothered because now the potential for something even worse is going to come up. And even if the kid has this like attitude of like, oh, this is it, this is my chance. And he's like got the money and he's like really excited. He wants to carry it or whatever, and feels like a real outlaw gangster. That's setting up the potential to lean into the next scene. And then all you would do is just rinse and repeat for each of the scenes that you have that you want to explore out. So I had a general idea of what that was. Then this gave me the specific scene beats. And then if I wanted to, I could come back in, like Lissetti was saying, and maybe modify this if I wanted to have a better idea of what the synopsis of this particular scene would be. But then you just do that for every scene. And I will say, if you're doing this for the first time, I would absolutely go through methodically and do every single scene for your objective story. What's going to happen is you're going to start wiring your brain to think in terms of those four, to the point where eventually you're going to do it intuitively and automatically. And maybe then on future stories or different projects, you don't need to go into that much detail. I know one screenwriter I worked with, he, on his second pass of this, or his second story, he's just going to do these scenes, but he's not necessarily going to break down into these specific beats, because now everybody has an intuitive sense of how to do this. This just gives you a specific thing so that you can match up your intuition with what the meaning of the story is. And then when you go through and you write just the scenes, then if there's a particular scene that you're kind of lost and you're not sure, well, I guess maybe down here, I'm not really sure how this fate one is going to play out. You know, we had a general idea, but that was probably one of the weakest ones, so that you can just break down the scene beats here and see, oh, okay, so it's going to be where they're going to do something based on their knowledge. They're going to try and structure it a certain way. Order can also be the law. So I think that would actually be, and then chaos, everything goes crazy. And then now they think of themselves differently. So then, oh, okay, now I have a better idea of what that's going to be like. And I'm not just working with this one, I'm working with these 4 to better inform that. And then you just do that for every through line. And you have the basis for a really strong story. And the best part about it is all these beats are all in service of what it was you're trying to do with your story, what it is you're trying to say. It's always coming back to this basic premise. So you can be assured, oh, today I just want to work on one scene. I'm going to work on the influence character's 3rd signpost, his 3rd scene. I'm just going to do this one little bit. That's all I have time for. Well, you know, you're not wasting your time because the structure has taken care of the fact that it's going to be connected to the larger picture. And then you can just drop in and do the parts that you're most interested in doing. Okay, does anybody have any questions about that? What is this? 3 hours? 3.5 hours? The setting.
Kind of 3 unrelated questions, but I just wanted to know, first off, will this workshop be available like in the writer's room or
Yes.
for any of us to watch on replay?
So it'll be completely public. It'll be open to everybody. Because like I said, 80 people signed up and 30 people showed up today. So I'm going to make it public. And then other people had asked to make it more accessible to have the transcript. So because it's 3 hours, that will take me quite some time. Then there'll be a second version of it where it'll be all nicely spelled out, because automatic transcripts are somewhat good, but then it takes some effort to get that cleaned up. I will have all the support material here on this. And then any sort of follow-up questions or anything, anybody can reach out to me at any time. Before you ask the other 2 questions, I just want to make sure I go over one last thing, which was this guy here, which is, give me 1 second. Come on, Chrome, there it is. Okay. All right, so then, so part of the intention of this is that so people know what I offer. The one thing is for Subtext. So the whole app that everybody's seen here in this workshop takes the thematic premise, puts an intelligent outline, and then of course expert support and everything. It's usually $190 a year. It's $150 till December 22nd, because that's a really cool day. And then also, I know everybody is worldwide. So if there are, if you're unable to do it, just write to me personally and we can work something out. So price parity, that kind of thing. And then you can go to subtext.app for all the information on that. And then the second point would be the second act solution cohort, which is exactly what happened today, but it's going to be 12 classes. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, 11 to 1, 2 hours. So there's 12 sessions and it's really, really cool. Applications are now, so it's January through February. I can only do 20 because there's a lot of work that goes into it, and I actually go over everybody's work. And you can work through your own story. That's what a lot of people did. They basically used it as consulting to use in the different workshops. So there's 14 spots left. I was going to make it 16, but then just because of what everybody was into it, like I was really excited that there were 80 people, plus to make it a little more accessible, they brought it back down to 1,200. And so January 13th is the deadline for that. So make sure you get that in. There's a little application to fill out. And that's through Maven. Like I said, those are the people that I hooked up with to be able to do all this. And let me make sure this is good to show. Okay, so then here, this is what that landing page looks like. It's got my great picture here of me answering story questions while I'm at lunch. I'm supposed to be eating lunch. And then, you know, everybody that's been through it before or has worked with me before and all the different stuff that you can go through. And just so you can see what that looks like, it's really cool. This is what I'm excited about because I have done this manually before and it was quite overwhelming. But the thing is, come on, hold on. It is right here and that screen looks like, what the heck is it? Is that it? No, that's not it. It is, oh, there it is. Okay. So this is like the student portal. So then in January, this is it, Tuesday, Thursday. These are all the different classes. It gets put on your calendar. And then the syllabus are these 6 modules. And then of course I have all kinds of videos and stuff like that. All the material is here. And then you submit the material here. And there's a private Discord for it. It's really cool. I was really excited about it. So hopefully people can take advantage of that. All right. Well, if nobody has anything else, thank you so much, everybody, for attending this first workshop. It was fantastic. I was really excited to have everybody show up and participate. And I hope you learned something. And as always, if you have any questions about anything, you can reach me online on the Discord server for Subtext. And I'm free to answer as many questions that I possibly can. And again, John's Conflict Corner classes in Subtext every Wednesday. Other than that, thank you everybody for participating, and I will see you soon.